Groff had been shelled out in the early aggression from the US Postals. He recovered, he came through, but in the end he did not catch Mayo, who came across the line to get that victory on the coveted Alpe d'Huez, the 23rd time, and this Spaniard, or Basque rider's name, goes into record books. And that's the route today, Bourg-d'Oisans in towards the gap, going back over today, a first cat climb, a Hope category climb, followed on by a second and third cat towards the back end of the race. They're going to leave Bourg-d'Oisans this morning and work their way through. What a classic day it's going to be. There'll be some tired legs, particularly when we go over the Col de Latore, the first category climb, working our way through over the infamous Col d'Isard, and then on the way through towards the back end of the race. This is going to be a day when, will they stay in the pack? Will they just wait and allow maybe Mr. Verdronk to go on this day, the 14th of July, Bastille Day? Will he have a chance on this undulating course to get a victory? And there you are, that can just show you how tough it's going to be. Towards the back end, they may be regrouping, and perhaps Verdronk or one of the French riders will try and romp into the gap on the 14th of July to do what they try and do every year. In between those mountains, you see there are a couple of sprints along the way. No great contest, I think, for that. But this man here, he's still got to be ever so watchful, because at the moment he hasn't dominated the race. I think when he came out the Alpe d'Huez, you could probably discern from the interviews that he wasn't exactly that confident that he'd sort of put an end to his main contenders for the crown. That's the temperature today, and back at Gap here, it is certainly 30 degrees in the atmosphere, but nearly 35 on the tarmac. Rolling out this morning, Bourg-d'Oisans, that's down the bottom of the mountain. They've come down this morning, they stayed last night, and on the way down, they in fact, we're now picking the live start up. We're just being confirmed this is the live start of the race as they now work their way out. Morrow yesterday, Sean, to me certainly was one of the revelations of the race, because he's had a bad start this season. He had some sort of virus. I remember seeing him quite in the early part of the season looking a bit morose from Morrow, and he got I suppose, I don't know, he got this sort of the effects of the virus which affected his confidence, but he's come back good, hasn't he? And that was a great ride by him yesterday.
Yes, it certainly was, and he was looking good in the last week. He's been up there quite a lot, very much to the fore on the flat stages, and that's a good sign. But you know, there was still a little question mark: would he be able to, you know, put in the ride on the mountains? Because he haven't done it in a while. But I think this year has been a pretty good year for him. The Dauphiné, he showed good signs, and he's you know, based his year really on the Tour, and so far it's going well. So it's looking promising for him.
A ceremonial ride out there. You saw the green jersey of Baden Cook. The Australians were doing so well at the start of the Tour this year, and then one by one they found themselves in all sort of trouble. Baden Cook survived yesterday's stage. He keeps the green jersey. The man in the polka dot jersey, Verdronk, who had been in the yellow jersey coming to stage yesterday, he rode very well at the climb, aided and abetted by young Rogers. Michael Rogers rode with him up towards the finish. They finished 9 minutes 29 seconds down, but Verdronk kept the polka dot jersey, and I think today he'll do all he can to keep that on this stage into Gap. Rolling out start, fairly traditional, and they've got between Bourg-d'Oisans and Gap to cover 184.5 kilometres. I'll put the half in very often because it can be quite important. The other day, you may remember, we had 230 kilometres the day before, and 230.5, which meant it was the longest stage. Anyway, at the back here you can see the jerseys of the AG2R team. They must have been very pleased yesterday with their performance of their young rider who won the Tour Down Under, starting the season there, Asta La Rosa. He's now moved up into 21st place over on general classification. Still rolling out from Bourg-d'Oisans, and it looks very peaceful this morning, Sean. A bit hectic coming off the mountain yesterday, and these roads that they're now trotting along were rather full of traffic yesterday, weren't they?
Yes, well, you know, there was so much people we see yesterday in Alpe d'Huez. It was record numbers really, and the traffic is it's usually difficult in Alpe d'Huez because everybody is on you know, on the one mountain, and to get down for it, everybody's going really for the same road, or you know, pretty much so. So it is a crazy mountain, and you know, it's growing bigger all the time. I think the last couple of years it's just getting bigger every year.
I asked the question of Sean because yesterday we were up the top at Alpe d'Huez and we positioned the car so as the broom wagon went through, but the poor guy was off the back, by the way, and that was Samuel Sanchez from the Huesca team. He came in 1 hour and 9 minutes down after the leader, and as he went through, we got the barriers open. We went zoom, we went straight back down the way the race had come up. We got stuck behind a couple of vehicles, but the general public weren't allowed out of that sort of first vital 4 kilometres. We got at a junction, and there was an arrangement for the press to come down, a police escort. We didn't see him. I think we were in front of them. Down we came. We found this little turn right where we came in the other day over the mountain sideways into the Huez village, and it was the official derivation, the official route down for the cars. I think we're probably the first car to get down there, and when we got down to the road going to Bourg-d'Oisans, I'll tell you this story by the chatting here now, because we got off the mountain in 45 minutes. That's a record. I've never got off the mountain before in less than 2 hours. As Jean-Marie Leblanc starts to wave the flag, and they go along the road to Bourg-d'Oisans, and as we got down here to the road into Grenoble, we then found, as the flag goes down, they get underway. There is Jean-Marie Leblanc. I don't know if he's going to be still in the main hot seat next year. He's a great Anglophile, by the way. He loves the sport. He's putting out on his phone there, come on you boys, get stuck in, don't hang about now. He's still sort of trying to drive the thing, but he's going towards retirement. And I think that whether he's going in next year and Monsieur Barles taking over, I don't know. But a man who's put so much into the sport, a past rider of the Tour de France, a man who went on to be a journalist with L'Equipe. We've just seen him waving the flag as they're going off down that road out. They've got the backs on Grenoble. We went the other way. They actually are going down out towards Briançon. We went the other way towards Grenoble when giving the story about coming down off the mountain. And then I will tell the story now, make Sean, well, not exactly blush, but on the way down, amongst all the foot soldiers walking off the mountain, because so many people, they walk maybe 8-10 kilometres on the way down. We happened to find on the road back to Grenoble, thundering past us, an ambulance, a sapeur-pompier, where some cyclists had fallen off on the way down, and so Mr. Fast driver himself, Kelly, dropped in the wheel, and we followed the ambulance down to Grenoble, passing all the traffic. We broke all records for getting off the mountain and into gaps. So all those long days we've been spending sitting in traffic jams, 2 hours here, 2 hours there, were completely changed yesterday. My congratulations to Sean, and thank you very much indeed. We actually got into Gap at 9 o'clock, and we had time for a decent meal. More of that and on, as Mike Smith now is going to tell us all about the quick poll. Good morning, Mike.
Good morning, David. Good morning. Nice to see that you're still enjoying this wonderful Tour de France weather. I think it's been the hottest tour for many, many years so far. No bad weather. We'll keep our fingers crossed it stays that way. Anyway, we're getting the quick poll question in today, very early, David, to give plenty of time to those people who like to take part. And it concerns Lance Armstrong, particularly after what we saw yesterday. Do you think Lance Armstrong is stronger than he was last year? Yes or no? Debatable point, perhaps. Anyway, the usual, www.eurosport.com. You'll find your way onto it on that site, and you can vote yes or no. Is Lance Armstrong stronger than last year? I think there could be quite a bit of a split there, David. I don't know what you think.
Oh, well, I don't know. We're still trying to translate it. Ist der Lance Armstrong stärker als im letzten Jahr? Comes up in German on our screens here, Mike. Thank goodness you can translate into English at the other end. We've got a bit of time here, so I think Stuart O'Grady, he's not supposed to use a mobile phone during the actual race. We've gone through the neutralise thing. Perhaps he's going to phone his wife and see how the little baby's coming up, because we've understood that his wife will be giving birth to a boy child, or what it might be, a lady child, at some point in the future. Don't exactly know where this great thing's going to happen. Christy Anderson got the information that his wife was in child. Sean, did you actually get to know when it's all going to happen, or did you get involved in that conversation with Christy?
No, the first I heard when Christy said it on air 2 days ago or 3 days ago, but I haven't heard anything, and Christy haven't mentioned. Forgot to ask her about it since, actually.
We will ask her later, won't we? She's full of bits of information. She's, by the way, down the start of Bourg-d'Oisans. We didn't actually see her on screen, but she's going out. She's been doing it all morning, nipping around, talking to these riders, and will come to us. The one thing about this shape of the race, the route it's taking, as you saw very quickly as we opened up the programme, it goes in what I call like a D shape. From Bourg-d'Oisans, as it loops round outwards from Bourg-d'Oisans, It starts a very gradual climb up to the Col du Glandon, and that is as you go out on the D. Now, if setting off from the Bourg-d'Oisans went the other way, going out towards Grenoble and came down to Gap, that's a short way. It's about 110, 115 kilometres, whereas they're going to zoom round in the right-hand direction through Briançon on your maps. I know many people who try and follow these things. You'll surely find Grenoble on your map. You'll find Bourg-d'Oisans, which is down a bit towards the east there, and then just follow that road. It's quite a main road over the top of the Col du Glandon in towards Briançon, and it curls back round again, zooming down in towards the southwestern direction before it comes to Gap. So you can see that nice little sort of curve around there, whereas the route for the followers of the race who are not going on the course itself, it'll be a matter of going back down towards Grenoble, then running down in towards Gap, and that takes him part of the way of the Route Napoleon, and that is, they're going to come down through that way in towards Gap, and Chris will be joining us at some point in the future. Looking here at the man at the front here, Eric Zabel, who is showing the scars of his touch for the tarmac the other day. He soldiered on yesterday, as did the main sprinters, to get into the finish in time, because there is a cut-off. He actually finished yesterday 42 minutes and 19 seconds down. The cut-off point was over about 52, 53 minutes. In fact, Jimmy Casper made it yesterday. He finished 179th. That's all we've got left as at this morning. Haven't heard about any non-starters, but certainly Jimmy Casper, 179 to finish yesterday. A courageous performance as we look at the yellow jersey of Lance Armstrong. And this man here, Eric Zabel, he more or less came in at the head of what we call the bus. They let the gaffer of the bus go through. He came in 42 minutes and 19 seconds down, and there was something like about must have been 60 or 70 riders. You didn't see it on air because by then you were off to some other sport, whereas they came in, the chaps who've been entertaining us on the flatter part of the course, that riders have been out there fetching and carrying for their team leaders, the bottles, chasing them back into bunch after a puncture. And in that group that they came in was the great Rolf Aldag. He came in that same bus group after his tremendous ride the day before yesterday into Morsey, and a most courageous performance by that German rider. Not surprising then that he came in 42 minutes and 19 seconds down. But surprising in that group that came in was Santiago Botaro. Botaro came in 42 minutes and 19 seconds down, riding for the same telecom team as Rolf Aldag, and it had been thought that Botaro was a man, if he could have a consistent Tour de France, he would be able to be up there in the top 10 places. He won the Tour de France mountain climbers jersey some years ago. He is the reigning world time trial champion. But unfortunately he just seems to have lost all his power, and Christie spoke to him the other day and he didn't know what had gone wrong. He just couldn't find his form. And Sean, what's this that happens with the riders when the form suddenly goes? You do the same training, it's the same year, and just the firepower isn't there. I don't think any medical reason. Is it psychological, or it's just one of those things? We'll just come back in a moment as we get a lovely top shot and let you know that it's 180 kilometres for the riders yet to go. So only 4 kilometres under our belts. So you can see the cables going up into the sky. These are the electricities that's pumped out from this part of the world, from the barriers they put across the rivers which come out of the Alps to provide the electricity for the field. Back then towards the back end of the field, and my goodness, some of these riders just having survived yesterday, wondering what's going to happen today. Time, I think, to put the the earpiece. Boss will want to talk to you. That's Marc Mattio's team, the France de Jeux, and certainly he'll be wanting his team to. Normally what they do is they check that before they actually get onto it. So there we are. As I said to you, the hydroelectric wires running out from these barrages which provide the power. As they trundle through here, we're looking down the results of yesterday, and one of the surprising chaps who really was in also trouble, yes, Santiago Botaro, finishing in 147th spot, 42 minutes down. Sean, he was saying that, mentioned that Christie said it, that he just lost all power. How does that happen? You do the same training and suddenly you're in trouble, eh?
Well, it's something you just never know. Sometimes you get that, and we've seen riders, and Botero is a perfect example. He's done a lot of training, a lot for the tour, but he's just not firing at all in this tour.
And back a little bit of trouble here. Quick change of back wheel, the mechanic making sure it goes in. to the right sprocket and lets it go into a much more lower gear, because when they have to take the wheel out, they put the gear mech over onto the far side of the block so they can take that easier, and then he's made it easier to get back in again. Mike Smith has the profiles of the climb today. Mike.
Well, the profile for the first big one, David, this first category climb, the Col du Glandon, which the Tour de France has gone over on many occasions. It's a very, very long climb, one of the longest climbs, not necessarily the steepest, but one of the longest without a doubt. 34 kilometres, actually. That's long, isn't it? It's about 20 miles, just over 20 miles. But it's not enormously steep, just gets progressively harder and harder simply because it goes on. There is a steeper part a little higher up, where the average gradient gets up to around about 6.57%, but not enormously steep. But when it goes on like that, David, it must be terribly, terribly wearing. And this is only the sort of hors d'oeuvre, if you like, to the big one of the day, the hors category climb, the Col du Glandon, which comes after 86 kilometres.
Gone quiet, Mike. Is there more to come? Oh, well, we're not going to do the next two small ones after that,
yeah,
are we?
Can I give you a piece of information? You
go on.
Well, you dropped me in it, to coin a phrase, yesterday, and I sat.
So what's new?
I sat embarrassed here when you threw me the question, what's the record time for the climb of L'Alpe d'Huez? I knew I'd got it somewhere, and I didn't have it. I confess, viewers, I didn't have it with me. And when we finished our broadcast yesterday, I thought, I've got to get it. And of course, I have found it. I knew it was Marco Pantani, but I couldn't remember what Marco's time was. And when I saw it, I realised it was a lot faster than I thought, David. So here's something for you to write down and put into your little statistics as well for future reference. The record was set by Marco Pantani, 1997, and it's from a specific spot just after they've turned right in Bourg-d'Oisans to the finish line. That stretch doesn't change. And here's the time, the record time, 37 minutes and 35 seconds. 37:35 is the official record for the timed climb of L'Alpe d'Huez. And incidentally, Lance Armstrong, when he won the stage 2 years ago, he produced the second fastest time, 38 minutes and 1 second. So there you are. Did I get out of jail?
We'll send you a hacksaw blade in a piece of cake. No, thank you, Mike. I've got it here somewhere, but as you know, and people don't know, we come with all these bits of paper and books and everything else, but Mr. Sean Kelly has most things in his mind anyway. Whilst you were talking, he wrote down here, just off the back of his out of his head, 38 minutes. So it wasn't a bad guess on his part, was it? So I think, yes, perhaps we could all be allowed out of jail after that one. It was rather hectic, though, yesterday, Mike, wasn't it? And I don't know what sort of feedback you've had, because you're sat in Paris, but a big conversation point. We didn't have much time to speak to people yesterday, but we've been talking to some of our co-commentators here at the finish about the reaction to yesterday's stage, and I got the impression that that must have been well received by the viewers of our programme. I don't know if you caught up with any of the people back there in Paris, but it's a cracking day. Thanks very much to the US Postal, which you see on our screen now, and Lance Armstrong being attacked by so many people. I reckon what a classic stage, but have you any feelings for it, Mike, since now the dust has settled?
Well, yes, very much indeed. The general opinion amongst all these hard-bitten journalists back at the ranch here in Paris was that was a cracking stage, one of the all-time classic climbs of L'Alpe d'Huez, because there were so many attacks, different people going at different times. The initial pace set by USP Ribera on the lower slopes, it just made for fascinating viewing. You couldn't take your eyes off the screen for a moment. That has to be one of the most exciting climbs of L'Alpe d'Huez for quite some considerable time. Now, David, I'm just getting a note over my headphones, and you may well have heard it as well, that we're coming to our first statistic of the day. We blast you with these from time to time and give you all these pieces of information, who's done this, what, when, and by how many minutes, and so on. And we're looking at the gap between the first rider and the 10th placed rider on the first mountain climb in recent tours, because quite often there have been huge gaps, and as you're going to see in a moment, yesterday there was not quite such a big gap. Yesterday the gap between the winner, Mayo, and the 10th placed rider was only 3 minutes and 19 seconds, and as you see, 5 minutes, 21 minutes, 6 minutes, 10, 5, 7. Yesterday saw more riders packed reasonably tightly together at the head of affairs than we've seen for quite some considerable time. Whilst Mayo won on his own, David, nobody actually ripped it totally to shreds, and as a consequence we still have a number of riders, a number of the fancied favourites in there with a shout of doing something, and who knows, perhaps toppling Armstrong, or at least giving him one heck of a fight in the remainder of the mountain stages.
Well, thanks for that, Mike. The graphics there for you all to see, and those people doing these things, by the way, they work a long time into the night to produce them and get them all ready for it. And Mike is now shuffling his bits of paper for the next statistic coming up.
Yeah, thank you, David. You're doing a good link job here. Thank you very much for that. Yes, less than 2 minutes. Oh, I think what they mean there, this is the French translating it into English behind my back here. Riders who finished less than 2 minutes down on Iban Mayo yesterday. Well, as you see, there were 6 of them, and that's far more. This just sort of emphasises what I was saying earlier. In 2001, particularly when Lance Armstrong just tore the field apart, there were no riders within 2 minutes of him. Of course, they were all splattered further down the hairpins, weren't they? As we see one rider having a little go. And we've got one more for the moment. Armstrong himself, David, said that he thought Ulrich was probably his... well, we're just going to have a look at this initial little break up the road, but I'm told we do have a third statistic coming up in just a second, comparing Lance Armstrong with Jan Ulrich. And just comparing the gap between these two riders and the gap that they've had between themselves in years gone by. But I think we're going to hold that one just for a moment. David, you just take us through this initial little sortie off the front.
I suppose what's going to happen here, I don't know, Sean is the expert here, to 32 kilometres, you drag all the way up, that one or two of the riders have decided to go off down there, maybe stepping stones for this, and guess who's there already? Veronika's gone. We were speculating earlier on that on this, the 14th of July, Bastille Day, they were going to, Veronika would go off for every minute. I think that might have been David Miller drifting across our screen. He's not actually taken the form yet, Mike, but certainly it's been marked out again by Armstrong, who, no, it is Armstrong. Hang on, let's have a look through this little one. Sean, this is amazing. Armstrong's gone straight on this. Do you think he's a bit scared that stepping stone's good form? Is he going to try and put the lid on it today? Or was that not his yellow jersey? I was staggered.
Well, I don't think Armstrong, you know, he's going to be too concerned at the moment, but you know, there's definitely riders going to go. The French riders, certainly, they're going to try and get into the breaks, and there's a lot of them with that idea. But we see Veronика there, he's very active in the front, but he's going for the mountain classement.
And he certainly set up a great road last. Now the Onse team are driving two riders. You can still see the US Postal down the bottom of the screen riding along here, and yes, I think Armstrong's still stuck in there, but I didn't detect what the hell that yellow jersey was going up in front. So confusing as far as I'm concerned. It was raised by one of our email viewers that there should only be a yellow jersey for the man who's leading on the general classification, but the Vina Calderoda team have got yellowish jerseys in there. We'll wait for confirmation on our radio tour here. We'll be picking up to let us know exactly what's happening out there, but I don't think they'll come back to it until it has some form. All we do know, see, is that it looks like they're coming back again, coming to the information over our headphones. And then, Sean, was that just a little flurry to wake up the... oh, my goodness, he's in trouble, isn't he, here already? Robin McEwen, again, there'll be a time cut on the stage today. If you're outside the stage, you're out of the race. Yes, they've only lost one rider on the stage. Amazing when you think the speed at which they went on that stage yesterday. They rocketed along the course, and they covered the 219 kilometres at 36 minutes, sorry, at average speed of 36 kilometres per hour, 36.7, so you can call it really 38 kilometres an hour. And that's just over 22 miles an hour, nearly 23 miles an hour. So despite that horrendous climb at the end and the Col de Galibier, they averaged nearly 23 miles an hour for the 219 kilometres. And yes, they are starting to roll at the front. This looks rather determined, but can Veronika make it to the end? Can he win today, or is he just going to go down with all guns blazing, Sean? Yeah, he's gone with the move so far.
Yes, he certainly is, but you know, he has to go with the moves earlier on. I think, as I said yesterday, he he's not sure of himself against the big climbers, so the thing for him to do is to get away in the early breaks and you know, pick up some points earlier on and see what happens later. So that is definitely his tactic, as we said, and as he said earlier in the race. He said a stage win was what he was looking for, and the mountain jersey, and to see how he'll go in the mountains, because he's not too sure, he said. But he's definitely climbing well. Yesterday we see him in the early part very active, going for the mountain points, and I think he's you know, the same. He's going about it the same way again today.
Amazing that so early in the race they've started the action here. 176 kilometres to go. We are in the Grand Alps, the Haute Alps, and the Tour de France on this, the centenary version, is up in the Alps, and we didn't have them in the race for many, many years. And interesting, we are given each day, or we're given at the start of the race, a lovely booklet which gives us all the information about the race, the time, the expected time, and the points they're going through, the kilometres and so on. And before each of the sections in our little yellow book, as we call it, they have a picture which goes back in time. And this one for Bourg-d'Oisans to Gap, there's a lovely old picture of riders. We watch them streaming along here. We'll wait for identification. Everybody controlled, actually in him, of some riders. It's a black and white picture, because that's all the cameraman could have in those days, of riders who are getting themselves some sustenance at the feed station. They're actually off their bicycles. They're going in there, helping themselves to whatever's available. They've got these musette bags on the back. They've got woolly jerseys with the pockets stuffed full of things they can get. And amazing, one of them has got 1, 2, 3 tubulars round his shoulders, wrapped around his shoulders, because in those days if they punctured they had to change them themselves, and they've got these funny little hats on and goggles because it's so dusty, and they're absolutely grubby with their floppy black woolly shorts, and the shoes just caked in dust, and they're helping themselves. It's a magnificent picture, and on the look of one of these riders here, his face is caked in the dust, and you can see where the goggles has been. He's taken them off to go and help himself to some water and some food at this. And I do commend to you, as you're watching this 2003 version, to trundle off to your local bookshop and just have a look at some of the books that are there, and some of the old black and white pictures. And in fact, in Gap, where we stayed last night, driving back through after having a reasonable little restaurant and a nice little meal in the main street in the centre, about every 100 metres they're hanging from the buildings on cords about 6 foot by 4 foot, or whatever the metre equivalent is, of these old pictures, these black and white pictures to begin with. And as you go further up this one-way street, you get towards, again, you get to colour pictures, and you get some of the latest riders too as well. A great effort put in by Gap to celebrate this centenary, and of course this also is July the 14th. So there's wonderful old pictures, and you can only get to feel how this race is if you look back at those pictures. I know that with Wimbledon, people may say, well, look at the old people playing in long trousers, and women in frocks and all in white, and having these old rackets made of wood. Yeah, fine, but they were playing on a piece of grass in the same place at Wimbledon. But this was taking place, the race over those years, on unmade roads virtually, originally on the flat roads, and then they went up in the mountain you're seeing here. And you can just go back and imagine that the gap between what happened then and now is enormous. They're still on the attack, and Sean's picking up some of the names of the people who are having a go. I thought I saw David Miller. Am I right, Sean?
Yes, Miller's there.
And he's busy writing down the numbers, so we'll come back to him in just a moment. They're coming over, so I'll shut up and let him pick him up on the radio tour. Back in a minute. All the numbers coming in. Back in a minute. You can watch the action. US Postal trying to get up to them, and the yellow jersey just towards the end. Right, Sean's got them down. You'll now have to sort of translate most of those into names. But of the little lot that came up, was anybody significant?
Well, we have Virenque, as you said, Miller there, De Luca is there. We have 16 riders in the front at the moment. Saveda, Voigt, as we see. So it's a big group, forming in the front. And for the postals, it's not a good thing to have such a number of riders in a breakaway. So I think they will, close it down quickly, because if they get 2 minutes, 3 minutes, a group like this, it makes it very difficult to pull back. So I don't think this will be long-lived, this breakaway.
How do you rate David Miller, though? Because yesterday we saw him just outside our commentary booth, bathed in sweat and looking like most of the riders across the line, absolutely very haggard by the proceedings. But he did finish yesterday 22nd, and that was 6 minutes 9 seconds down, just behind Astor Aloza, who'd set a very hot pace coming off the top of the Col du Glandon. Astor Aloza was at 6 minutes and 4 seconds. David Miller in 22nd spot at 6 minutes and 9. That means on the general classification now that Miller is 22nd overall. It's interesting that the shuffling of the pack of everybody in front of him virtually have moved up on the GC. David now 22nd overall, 6 minutes and 4 seconds. So he's still in just outside that top 20 riders, and has probably got a bit of freedom. We'll have to wait and see. We'll come down the overall classification shortly, but you can see the peloton are not allowing those riders to get much freedom. Sean, there we are. You can see the US Postal's chasing. So nice to see that Dave Miller there. And anybody else of significance?
Well, we have seen, there's a lot of riders, a lot of teams up there at the moment. Severo, Serrano, Arts, Carpets, Mercado, Bertagnoli, De Luca, Glumser, Virenque, Voigt, Verbruggen, Bocharov, Echeverria, Harry and Pelazzotti.
And that's interesting, Pelazzotti to be there, and he's a young guy who I think we might be seeing a little bit more of as the race develops. And Sean, is this what we call one of those transitional stages, or is it still too important? I mean, is it one chance where people like David Miller is very good at getting stage victories between the big mountains? Here we are coming out of the Alps. We've got a pretty horrendous day today, but then we rest, well, not rest, we go on down towards Marseille, Gap to Marseille, then there is a rest day, and then to Narbonne, going towards Toulouse. Nothing tremendous in there. This interim stage is giving people a bit down on the general classification a chance to go, but David's gone with this one. But we've got some pretty horrendous climbs yet to come, and surely his Herculean effort yesterday, he's got to come up this Col de Lotre, which Mike Smith showed you on the graphic a bit to begin with. Oh Mike, we've got this little graph coming across the bottom. Do you want to say more about the quick poll?
Yeah, well, just give people another reminder about that question that we've asked rather early in the programme, to give people plenty of time. 25 kilometres still to go to the top of this first category climb. Is Armstrong stronger than last year? Yes or no? Very simple question. On what you've seen so far, what do you think? Is Armstrong stronger than he was last year when he got his 4th victory? That's the quick poll question. www.eurosport.com. I know there's a lot of you out there that like to take part in this quick poll each day, as indeed you like to send in the emails. We might get through some of those, David, before this stage gets too far into the real action later. But there's the quick poll. Have a go. We'll probably give you an interim look at just how things are going, and of course, as ever, I'll give you the final result of today's quick poll in the post live a little later on in the afternoon.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. We've just been rolling up on the screen. You can see there the rundown on those riders. Sean's making a note too, in case it came on too fast for you. But the way in which the US Postal are dragging along the train behind them, you can see them in single file right here, seems to suggest they're not going to get them too far down the road. We'll have to wait and see as that goes out before our very eyes. The Lac de Chambon, you can see that we saw the Chambon barrage when we came in yesterday. That's stopping the water from going down, using the rocks on either side to provide the water for the hydroelectric system further down the valley. The US Postal's not allowing the breakaway group to get too far down the road, and what a courageous job they did yesterday, as that the riders setting after the 16-man breakaway group they've got just down the road. It's not going, I think, to get too far down the road. We'll have to wait and see how that transpires. But it has been getting with Armstrong taking that yellow jersey so it's early. We're on now the stage 9 of the race. US Postal got to do a lot more work than they've done in the past. And as we see them working here again on the front. Sean, a quick word about them yesterday. Explosive burst at the bottom of the climb of the Alpe d'Huez. Looking back at that, we can see the race settling down here, and Paul, Jimmy Casper. Oh, is that Cassar at the moment? Yes, Cassar having a bit of trouble. You can see the picture. We'll come back and update you with those riders to just be on the thing. But going back to yesterday, as this race settles down, Sean, was that too much of a demolition derby and they suffered for it later on, or do you think that was the only tactic they could employ?
No, I think it was a good tactic for the US Postals to put in motion. Ulrich, I don't think he liked that sort of an attack on the bottom of a climb. He rather ride into it and get settled into the climb, and then he can build on it from there. But the way the US Postals, I'd say that was their main target. Ulrich, he doesn't like this, so we will definitely do it. And the way they went about it, when we see them attacking the bottom of the climb, as you said, David, it was like the last 500 meters in a sprint, the way they were going. And we see Beltran, like, he can't climb that guy, and the way he was giving it 100%, it was very impressive, and it just blew that main leading group to pieces.
And going through the tunnel into coolness as they're settling down. The chase is going full chat as we're now going back to Mike Smith in the coolness of the dungeons of Paris.
Yes, it is fairly cool here at the moment, David, although I can just show you outside here in Paris it is extremely hot. We've had roasting temperatures, and I've just heard, David, as you've queued over to me, that we do have a technical problem. That's what happened earlier with this particular graphic, the one showing the comparison between Messrs Armstrong and Uri. So fingers crossed we'll get to it eventually. We do have plenty of time, don't we?
Okay, Mike, and we have Christy on the phone, who's been down at the start of Bourg-d'Oisans. Christy, good morning to you.
Good morning, David.
Hello, Christy. How are things going?
Things are going pretty well, and surprisingly, at the start, everyone wasn't looking too dead after yesterday. Everybody was quite chirpy and willing to have a chat. In fact, the U.S. Postal team rode in, and Shorthead Cappy came in like a basketballing tank top and headphones. He looked like a real New Yorker, and I was personally quite happy to see that. But everybody was willing to have a little bit of a chat.
You're a New Yorker, aren't you, Christy?
Yes, I'm from New York, absolutely. And New York doesn't produce that many cyclists because it's pretty hard to train in Manhattan. But also, I spoke quite at length with Michael Rogers today, and we're talking to him about what a great tour he's having and how he seems to be climbing well, and he's looking to do something in the time trial. And even today, his objective is to, really stay with Richard Virenque as much as possible. And Bettini, of course, will be working for Richard in the beginning, much the same tactic as yesterday, to scoop up as many of those KOM points as possible.
Well, he's certainly been in action. You won't be seeing the pictures we're seeing, but an early group set away, and Virenque went off with that one. In fact, he's with this group now, about 16 men. Not much of a lead at the moment. US Postal's doing the work on the front. Nice to hear you say about how relaxed they were, Christy, but after yesterday's suffering, was there any sort of fear amongst maybe the sprinters or anything about today's stage as well, or did you not have a chance to speak to them?
There wasn't too much intrepidation at all. I mean, I even spoke to Andre Perron, and he said, yeah, he might do something today. And I said, well, isn't tomorrow's profile a little bit more suited to your talent? And he said, when I feel good, I could even go in the mountains, and I'll be looking for an opportunity to get away in a break today. And as far as U.S. Postal goes, there's been a real mixed camp. I guess Johan Bernil said this morning that the speed at the beginning of the race yesterday on the Telegraph was a little bit quick for Harris, and he did have a hard time in the beginning. But of course, as you saw, they all regrouped on the descent of the Galibier. And he said that, yeah, Lance wasn't 100%, but there is a little suspicion that possibly Lance is once again, and the whole U.S. Postal team is once again maybe playing a little poker with us, and not too anxious to do much to hang on to that jersey today, but maybe waiting until after the time trial. There's some thought. I mean, I personally believe that if you've got all 9 of your riders at the base of Alpe d'Huez, your team isn't showing really any weakness on any level. So, yeah, I'll be curious to see what the tactic is from U.S. Postal today. But there is definitely a mixed feeling on Lance's condition. There's some people do think that maybe he is having a little bit of a struggle, and today will certainly show whether that's the case.
Well, what's showing on our screen now is a concerted bit of an attempt to split the... Stay with us a moment, though, Christy. I just want to come back to you on a particular point. Is that David Miller having to go out there, Sean?
Yes, it certainly is.
Look like it.
Yeah, he's decided to attack the group, and he's thinking is that the group is too big. He needs to break it up and get away with a smaller group, because it's too dangerous for the US postals, and he knows that there's going to be pullback.
Right, well, Sean's keeping on with the racing out there. Just a little comment from you, Christy, because you, I think, stayed up at the Alpe d'Huez last night, or wherever you were locally, and you got to Bourg-d'Oisans. What's it like with all the people? Because, what, the 300,000 of them yesterday, there must still be a residue of them out there. What's the atmosphere like from them?
It's just incredible, the amount of people that are here, and the amount of people on bikes descending Alpe d'Huez this morning on the way to the start was really quite exciting, if not a little bit dangerous. But everybody's still all painted and dressed up, and they've really come out in force. A lot of Dutch people are here. It's an amazing amount of orange around, and of course the Americans have begun to arrive in hopes that Lance will be in yellow before the Alpine campaign is finished. But I'll be curious to see and if this unfolds this way today. But I look to see Lance today just following, making sure he stays with Beloki and possibly tries to put a little bit of time into Beloki today, and not really worrying a whole lot about anyone else. I don't see him looking with too much whites of his eyes at, Ulrich anymore, or Christophe Moreau. I think he's going to be just pegging back Beloki as much as possible.
Okay, Christy, we can talk about that when you get in here, because you'll come and join us later on. But on your way through, if you do trap some of these, I don't think you'll see many of the Americans from now on in. But I'd like, during your sort of research out there for the program, perhaps it might be interesting to get a few words from some of them and get the observation where they come from. Because I too, yes, was staggered at the numbers of Americans up at the top of the climb. You could hear them a mile away, because Americans have quite loud voices, as you know. There's nothing wrong with that, but you could pick them out, and the clothing they wear and the bikes they ride. That's a group. It'd be nice to know where they've come from, Christy, as you speak their language. If you see someone on the road coming into here, perhaps a quick word from them, because it'd be nice to know where I'm sure they've all been encouraged to come here from Lance, and how many times they're coming. This is the 5th. I'm sure there must be more American cyclists and followers than we had before, Christy. So if you can pick something up on the way or tomorrow, I'm sure our viewers back in Great Britain would love to hear that, because of course you may remember the Pilgrim Fathers set off from Plymouth and established camp in America all those many years ago.
Well, David,
how you going, Christy? You still there?
Yes, I am still here. David, yesterday there was a huge camp set up with about 2 kilometers to go, and they were putting stickers on all the team cars which said Lance is God. And all the trucks, all the team mechanics trucks that had to make it up the climb, they go quite slowly, and they all were covered in these Lance is God stickers, which was they were quite funny.
That's another god. Everybody has their own gods, by the way. In fact, there is only one god, and he's all gods. That's a very interesting comment, that. Okay, Christy, we may hear from you later on if you spot something on the road you want to whiz in through the Reggie. Otherwise, we'll see you when you get here in the commentary box later on. Okay, Christy,
well, I'm
bye-bye.
down the course now. Bye.
Okay, look forward to seeing you. Bye-bye. Well, there we are, Christy Anderson, the American, as you can gather from that, married to Phil Anderson, who's over here with a crowd of Australians, more Australians I've ever seen before too as well. Had a chat to some of those from Melbourne the other day, you may remember, all dressed up in the Australian national jersey, the white one with the green, yellow and green bands round about it. And they were enjoying the atmosphere, certainly because the chance of him getting the 5th victory is there. There's Americans over here too. But what about the Brits? We've seen the Union Jack waving many times. And here's David Miller, who had that disappointment on the first day in the prologue to lose the yellow jersey by 0.08 of a second. There's a long group of riders chasing after our little leaders. Sean, while we've been talking to Christy, you've been watching the racing. Just a few comments about how it's transpired in the last 5 minutes or so.
Well, it's a lot of action. That group we see got pulled back, but and David Miller went in the attack just before they got caught, because he knew the US Post were going to close it down, and he tried to form a smaller group on the front. And there is a group here on the front at the moment with 6 or 8 riders, but the peloton is still very close to them, and the US forces are, setting up a pace. They're not allowing, the riders who are dangerous in the general. I think Miller is a bit too dangerous in the general to allow way so early in the day. If the riders who are a long way down the general, I think if that happens, the US forces will allow it to pull out the gap slowly. Riders who are, 10 minutes plus down on the general. But, the riders like we see up there, we see Miller, Yaks from the Onsday team. Those riders are too dangerous in the general, so they're not going to allow them to get away at all.
But this long climb, Sean, a wearing down process, this quickly into race, and I said earlier that they averaged just 22 miles an hour for the stage yesterday. The overall average of this race so far is 42.353 kilometres per hour. That's well over 25 miles an hour. That's an average, by the way. 179 riders left in this race. They've averaged just over 25 miles an hour for the 1,400, let's say 1,500 kilometres of racing they've done so far. That's about it's about nearly 900 miles or something at that tremendous speed, and they're going out again like bullets from a gun. Is this how can they keep this up, this speed today?
Well, it's going to be a hard day, and we looked at the early part in the attacks, and we see McEwen going out, we see Sandy Cassar, and the bunch at the moment, it's blowing to pieces, and we see a group going out here actually. Quite a number of the US forces losing contact with the main group and with their leader Armstrong. So not a good situation for Armstrong at all, and for the US forces. And they're getting a very hard ride trying to close down that gap of 15-16 riders was going very fast, and they had to ride very hard to close them. They're paying a bit of the price for that now.
You don't know because you were never there, but when I was always on the back, your arms go straight, your head starts to rock, and the pain. So there's Sean O'Grady in the National Championship jersey of Australia, and Botero, he's in all sorts of trouble. This is sort of the way the shoulders set, isn't it? And the head starts to rock, that you're not really flowing, are you, eh?
Well, when you say I was never in that position, David, you're wrong there, because I was in many occasions. I think everybody gets into that position during their career, even the best of the guys. When you start off the beginning of season, there's always a moment when you're in a stage in the end and you try to hang on. Even the best guys like Armstrong, the Endurance, they always get those moments. And I certainly had quite a number in the Tour de France. But yes, when you are struggling and you're under pressure, you do start to go lower on the bike, and really go down. Yes, and that is the familiar position when you're really under pressure.
You contrast this the way these riders up the front, can't you, Sean? And where we just see in the back, the fellas there, and the heads are down, the shoulders are up, and they're just hanging on for grim off the handlebars and wondering where the next bit of effort is going to come from. What a contrast, eh?
Yes, well, when you look at the the difference of the guys up front and the guys hanging on in the rear of the peloton, and we've just heard over the radio the main bunch is in 3 sections, in 3 groups now. So that proves like that the pressure is really on, and the riders are starting to suffer. We see there one moment there was gaps open, and we see some of the riders trying to jump around to close the gap. A lot of riders under in problems at the moment, and the guys who went out really in the beginning, the time delay for them is going to be difficult, because if they keep at this up front all day, well then the time delay is going to be very difficult for the sprinters to make it inside.
Time check coming at the moment of the leading group, and then back to the second group, and Sean's making note of those. And quite a big group coming up at the moment, and in that group too I noticed Moncuti for the Cofidis team was 66 on his back. Now he will just take an easy ride, I think, up there, because David Miller is up in the front group as the water comes cascading down from these mountains. When the snow it thaws, it comes down. That's why these great Alps were formed all those years gone by, when the snow on the top, or the ice, melted, and bit by bit over the years the water thundering on down has formed this alpine scene that you're going through, or we're going through right now. An amazing way in which it was developed over the years, and these are the parts of the world where still lots of wildlife is out there. We ain't going to see much of it today, I don't think. We've got to concentrate upon the racing, but if we do, I hope I'll be able to just give you a bit of information about this part of the world. It is an amazing place, not only in the winter. Many of you watching may go skiing at the various ski resorts, but in fact we seem to have lost Landis, Rubera, and a couple of others at the moment, Peña, and and what's that?
Yes,
Sean?
4 riders in the US postal that cannot follow in the main group, and there was Payne, Landis, Padronos, and I didn't get the name of the other one. I think I thought I had Ekimov.
It might be Ekimov. Going, we've got Padronos there?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. Because yesterday, going back to the onslaught at the bottom, I mean, the Americans, when they go to war, they just put everything in. They have enormous firepower, and they did the same thing yesterday. They put virtually the whole of the team, except Peña was already off the back anyway, was struggling. They put the whole lot of the team at the front. You may have seen it coming out of the Bourg-d'Oisans, up on towards the Alpe d'Huez, and pow! They just let all guns go, blazing. And in the end, the biggest 6-gun himself was the only one left. And the decimation which went back, which will give you some indication of why they're struggling now, is at the end of the stage yesterday, Victor Hugo Peña, who had the yellow jersey a few days ago, was 31 minutes and 41 seconds down. Padronos, the rider from the Czech Republic, was also 31 minutes and 41 seconds down, and also 31 minutes and 41 seconds down was Ekimov. So they took an awful pasting. They did the driving at the front to get Lance to the bottom of the Alpe d'Huez. George Hincapie and Landis, who were also dropped off on the climb after blazing away. Floyd Landis yesterday finished 19 minutes and 3 seconds down, as did George Hincapie, in a little group of riders there. So you see the damage that was done when they really gave some stick, and it looks like now, with the speed at which David Miller and that group are forming at the front, is making life very difficult for those tired legs of the US Postal riders who did so much yesterday to get Lance Armstrong in the yellow jerseys. So we're going back to Mike Smith and some more graphics.
Well, it's the graphic of the climb of the Col du Glandon, David, and as you can see from the hill profile, we're over halfway up this long climb, but remember how long it is, 34 kilometres long, as I said earlier in the programme, one of the longest climbs that the Tour de France ever does, if not the steepest. So still some considerable way to go for this lead group, which I believe still contains David Miller, and well, there's going to be a lot of perspiration being dropped on the road and down onto the bikes, I should think, David, because the temperatures out there, as you know, because you're down in Gap waiting for the finish of the stage, the temperatures on this Tour de France, today included, are really much higher than we've experienced for a number of years.
Yes, and in fact we've not been over there for some years, the Lautrette. 1976 I think was the last time we went over, with Konati being the first man over the top of that race. But actually the Lautrette, 2,058 metres above sea level, the first man over was in 1911, so you can imagine this race started in 1903. In 1911 they were still riding on single speed bicycles with laid back angles on their frames, and the first man over the top in 1911 was a man called E. Georget, and followed in 1912 by none other than that great man Christophe, who set that sort of a bit of history when he broke his forks going down into the valley after one of the big climbs ahead of him. So it's an old climb, it's well been out there since 1911, and some famous names have been over in top place. Louis Bobby was over in 1948, Bartali 1937. It's a very well-known climb, and that lies ahead of these riders. Just looking at the way that the riders here are all strung out still, bearing in mind that they're going to get to the top of the Col du Glandon. They'll have only covered 38 kilometres of this race, and this long drag up toward the top. It's a sort of, I want to say the word speed climb. We don't always can give you the severity of a climb, but I think in this occasion, Sean, is it fair to say that it's the speed at which they're going up rather than the actual steepness from that graph that Mike Smith was showing?
Yes, certainly it is. The speed is causing the problems here. We see that group of 15 riders went away, and they were, going really hard. The posters had to ride really hard to take it back, and it caused a lot of problems in the peloton. As we said, it's split into three, and we see riders now, they're scattered all over this climb, but it's not, as you said, David, a steep one. It's just a sheer speed, and in the start after a stage they had yesterday, the riders need a bit more time to get really right into the stage and get the legs warmed up, and they didn't get long to do that, so a lot of riders in difficulty.
Also, Fletcher's being off the back too. A lot of riders in trouble at the moment. And Sean, did you get that?
Yes, Armstrong at 30 seconds, and Fletcher, actually, he was in this group. They were 6, and then there was another 6 joined, so they were 12 up front, and Fletcher is not able to follow in this breakaway, so he's being pulled back by the group of Armstrong, but 30 seconds at the moment. And again, it's a group with 12 riders. It's, you know, it's a bit on the big side for Lance to leave, get away on the postals, because later on, if they all start working and they pull out a gap, it's difficult to control it. So I don't see him allowing this one to get away, but Lance definitely have problems because some of his teammates weren't in the first part of the bunch, which was broken into 3.
Well, that's the fellow at the back there, 32. We're hearing Garzelli's in trouble too as well at the moment over the headphones. This man Fletcher, just on his screen here, number 32. He's one of the few Spaniards who actually likes riding the single-day classics up in the north. Most of the Spaniards only like to ride the mountainous races where there's lots of sunshine, but he's one of the few chaps who's quite happy to go up and ride hard in the big classics up in the north. We're going through La Grave Le May at the moment.
Germandia, Barra attacking the Armstrong group, so and a lot of riders you know, trying to get out of the bunch, and they can see that the US Postals are in a bit of trouble at this moment, so they're trying to get across to this break, because it looks like a one that if it gets a minute and a half, 2 minutes, well then it could go a long ways and could be the break of the day.
But on the general classification, Belocchi, who we saw being very exuberant yesterday, he's 40 seconds down on Armstrong. Ivan Mayo, yesterday's stage victor, 1 minute 10 seconds coming into the stage today. Wunderkopf, who did a sterling ride yesterday at 1 minute and 17 seconds. Manchebo, 1 minute 37. Hamilton, who was undoubtedly the man of the match yesterday with that cracked collarbone, at 1:52 on general classification. Ulrich in 8th spot at 2 minutes and 10 seconds. Basso 9th this morning at 2:25. Jaschke 10th at 3:20. I think except for Jaschke we've not seen much action. When will those top riders who are looking to dislodge Armstrong take advantage of the reducing numbers of US Postals? Are we going to wait, do you think, Sean, to the Col d'Isard when they'll have covered 86 kilometres? Is that the sort of, could that be a decision point?
Well, I think if Lance is, in problems and the team is in problems, I think we will see, a lot of attacks, and I think, we could see him, right through the day, as we see here now. We have an attack very early. It's really early in the day on the Lotharet to see these guys attacking, and some of the guys who are up in the general, like a Yax here, who was up, up in the general classement, he's still pulling it on out here. But I think that's the tactic that they will make it really hard for the US Postals. Try and get Lance without teammates in the second 50% of the stage, and then we will see the likes of Belocchi and the real guys for the general classement trying to do something against Armstrong.
Look, viewer, I'm showing the headlines from Lakeheap. Oh, you can't see. We don't have cameras here in the finish line, nor can you see Mike Dungeon-Smith down there, because there's no light where he's working from, poor chap. He's got a candle burning to see his facts and figures. But Lakeheap this morning had a big heading, Enjeu et contre tout. In other words, he's in the yellow jersey, but he's against everybody, and that, I think, is showing today that Lance Armstrong, this L'Equipe newspaper is fantastic. The big front page there of Lance Armstrong, and all round about him are riders who are attacking him, and so, as he said yesterday, it ain't over yet, and certainly it's the headline there in L'Equipe this morning, Enjeu et contre tout. So everybody's against him. It's a sort of action we've seen, I won't say towards the end of his career, but it was Indurain who dominated it, and towards the back end, and particularly after his 5th victory, Sean, he began to get serious opposition. Armstrong obviously wants 5 Tour de France to join up with the greats, but it does seem that we all thought about it when he started, he's under a lot more pressure this year. How would you view it after looking at the Stade de Morzine and the Stade de Alpes and what's happening today?
Well, it looks like that Armstrong is not as dominant as other years. On the Alpe d'Huez, we've seen, 2 years ago, for example, when he arrived on the bottom slopes, they did much the same as yesterday. They just went into it really hard, and Armstrong took over very quickly and went from a long ways out and just, destroyed the rest of the field. So I don't think he's as strong as the past years, but the other question is, are Mayo and some of the other riders after improving? And it's impossible to know, but definitely I think the other contenders for the Tour, they have a better chance this year. They have more hope after yesterday, certainly, because they were able to attack Armstrong. We see Bolocki, we see Hamilton attacking, Vingegaard attacking. These guys are going to get the morale because they say, well, Lance is not as good as other years. But the interesting thing yesterday was he left the riders who were not too dangerous in the general, like a Mayo. Lance left him go away, but when Hamilton attacked, when Bolocki attacked, the guys who he feel for the time trial and for the general classic are more dangerous, he was covering them down very quickly. So he wasn't really in crisis, but certainly I don't think he was at his best as we've seen other years.
That we'll wait and see, because he's going through an area, a very beautiful old area, an amazing part of the world. We haven't seen much vegetation up in the mountains, but this is a part of the world where in fact they've released the bearded vultures to swoop down upon the prey, and I've just thought perhaps we might see the bearded vultures swooping down Armstrong. He's going through, I said, an amazing part of the world, and over the years, because it was just cut off from the rest, all these things are happening, and certainly the bearded vulture was reintroduced, and they're up there in the sky, and the eagles swooping as well too, and Armstrong. And of course, do bear in mind that the national emblem of America is the white-headed eagle. If you see something up there in the sky, we don't know whether it's going to be a Bolocki that's going to be swooping on him from the bunch here going through, or whether in the end that Ulrich can recover from yesterday and have a go at him too as well. But it's a beautiful, beautiful part of the world, and I think Lance Armstrong right now, as Jaska McGee and Cosero are dropping off the back. That's quite significant with they're off the back, aren't they, Sean? Not off the front?
No, I think...
are they chasing up?
No, I think this is the leading part of the breakaway.
Every time the camera goes back, the old days you used to have a little thing which camera 1, 2 and 3. Yes, off they go. Well, McGee took a bit of a pasting yesterday, as did Cosero, so this must be perhaps more. There we are. This is the beautiful big slopes up. There's still some snow up there, and you can see the fir trees going up way as they go up into the north, right up into the slopes, because up into the skies with the deciduous trees further on down, unable to stand the conditions up here. The soil is very thin too, and the trees have to do the best they can to hang on up there, but certainly the fir trees up there on the lovely slopes, and then beyond that you get beyond the tree line, and that is where it gets very hot indeed, and that's on the Col d'Izzard. We're going to see a very barren landscape, and there the sun will beat off the rocks, and they're going to make it very difficult for these riders on this then stage 9 of the Tour de France from Bourg-d'Oisans to Gap. Back to the head of the group. Sean, how do you see this a lot? They seem to be, you said, a bit numerous, I think is the word.
Well, the group in the front is finding hard to sort itself out, and there's a lot of riders attacking out of the bunch as well. But this group, we have 3, 6, about 9 or 10 riders. As we see here, Yax is talking with some of the riders from Alessio. He's saying like, why you're not riding. So some of the riders are not keen to ride at the moment. It's a long ways out, a long ways to go in the day. So some of the riders are a little bit scared of that. And when you have 1 or 2 riders who want to sit on, well then that really messes up the rhythm of the group, and they start having a little bit of discussion with each other, because they want everybody to ride through to share the pace setting, and then they start losing time.
It's all right sitting in the car, isn't it, giving Gazzelli an earful. He hasn't got to ride his bike. Interesting to see how they've cut or turned the sleeves back in the top here to allow the cool air. I think it was Sean Yates who was the first man to do this cutting off the sleeves, and perhaps we might find today, Sean, to get a chance to speak to Sean Yates once we get, say, down in the flats, to see if we can get his point of view on Hamilton, because Sean Yates is in the second car of the CSC team, and he was the man who started the cutting off the sleeves of his jerseys. there they are on this climb, 152 kilometres yet to go. When they get to the top of the Col de Lautre, 146. So we take 46 from 52, means we've got about 6 kilometres to go towards the top of this very, very long climb indeed. The race is settling down, and over the top, once we get there, it ain't a flat by any means, because they just go straight down in the valley and straight up the Col d'Isard. So it's one of those days, it's either up or it's down. There's not much in between until we get past the 130 kilometre mark, and then it undulates. It doesn't get too flat, but it undulates a bit. What's the situation at the moment, Sean?
Well, we still have this group in front, as we see. You know, we have Bettini, who was came over that he was there, Zamperini, Chavanel, Lopez de Munha, Yax, Casero, McGee, as we see. So these are the riders who are up the road. They're not all together at the moment, as we see here. We have Casero and we see McGee here. So you know, there's riders in between, and a difficult time for the US posters, because early in the day, a lot of riders trying to, you know, get away, riders coming across here. It's going to be a long, hard day for them. It started out to look like it's going to be a casual day in the first number of kilometres, but that did not last for long.
Well, they're ready to pounce on Armstrong today. They're certainly putting the pressure on. We're going through the Alps, and we're moving down towards Marseille tomorrow. And we'll be going out of the area where, in fact, they've been giving the wolf, by the way, some protection. It's a protected species in France, and is now starting to get himself out there and start killing the sheep as well. So is the wolf going to pounce on Mr. Armstrong today? We'll have to wait and see. Certainly a bit further north than that, where the sun is up there, the eagles are still swinging round, and the effort of riding through this delightful countryside, if you're on holiday or you're going skiing, is beginning to tell upon these riders. Of the start today, having lost yesterday, we saw some retirements. Just to put you in the picture of yesterday's stage, the one outside the general classification was Samuel Sanchez. 3 rows did not take part yesterday: Gonzalez, Gustavo and Montgomery from the Fassa Bartolo team. And amongst those who abandoned on the way into the finish yesterday was Loda, Gutierrez, Tola and Bocuno. They all abandoned yesterday. So we lost quite a number of riders from the race, leaving us with 179. And I'm sure they're all of them trying to survive today. And then tomorrow we have a flatter stage, and then after that a day's rest. There's Ulrich here, looking concentrated. I wonder exactly how he responded. We didn't have our normal run-in to the programme this morning, but Mike Smith back in Paris. Are we expected to go back to your usual sort of 15-minute programme? In particular, I think you speak to the Bianchi team, don't you?
Yes, we are looking quite closely at the Bianchi team, which of course emerged out of the ashes of Team Coast, which just disintegrated earlier on this season. And although we didn't get an introduction this morning because we wanted to go straight into the start live with you, David, yes, tomorrow we shall be back with our little 15, 20, 25 minute introduction, whatever it is, before we go to you, and I feel sure that we shall have further insights into the workings behind the scenes of the Bianchi team.
Thank you, Mike. So the Bianchi colours, these celeste blue and the white bands round about them. As Baden Cook in the green jersey here with the green shorts as well for FDJ. He's been to slide out of the frame too. We spoke yesterday, Sean, to a dear lady who's involved with the FDJ. And did you say that the FDJ strip is selling rather well or something? That's to paint it green now, aren't they?
Yes, they said in the beginning in Paris it didn't do too well for the first days, but after that it really took off. And she said the stocks they ran out on a number of days over the last 3 or 4 days. So it just goes to prove the success of the team. You know, it's really in demand, the kit now. And Française des Jeux, they have these tents at the start and finish area, which you know, they put people on, and she said it was really after picking up in the last 2 or 3 days.
But I was listening to your conversation going backwards and forwards in French while we were having a meal last night, because we didn't get there in time to have something to eat last night. I got the impression that she was talking about the pirates who are actually copying the jerseys and selling them cheap. Was that right? Did I get it right from what's going on?
That's exactly right. There's other people have stands, and they set up a bit outside of the area. The stand that they do is the official, Française de Jeu, and they have the permission to be inside the start area of the two and the finish area. But other ones are setting out just a bit further out, and they're selling some sort of
Chinese copies,
not official jerseys. But we have them in all the sports. In football, we have so many of them, the team kits. So it's nothing new.
Yes, I know. When I worked for Halfords, a number of times we found people knocking off things, particularly in the BMX days when we were forcing that through. The number of things that cropped up with people getting on the back. And what does happen in front, by the way, is we're looking at the back of the race, and Sean's going back to pick up the detail. And if we're going off the tangent from the race and coming backwards and forwards and putting in on little ancillaries, and it's the first time you've switched on Eurosport's coverage of Tour de France, do bear with us, because we do feel that many people here are not that detailed into the detail of cycle racing. Yes, you can see the blue jerseys here of the US Postals. That's Ekimov going through there. There's the yellow jersey of Lance Armstrong, who is really trying hard to look after that, keep his opponents at bay today. Many of these things we'll describe to you technically as we go through, but we're going to be all the way through this stage, right from the start, right the way through to the finish. And if people dip in and dip out, we'll try and update them as well on what's happening, but also little ancillaries on the side. We like to let you know about some of the sort of country they're going through, the food they eat and things like that, and particularly, as we're just talking about, the knockoff copies of the F de Jour jersey. Back to Mike.
Thank you, David. And now within 5 kilometres of the finish. There you are. That gives you a clear idea. If you follow the blue line, and you will see that we're now well over 3/4 of the way up the climb. The three leaders with less than 5 kilometres to go. I bet they'll be glad when they get over the top. This an incredibly long climb, and hasn't it played havoc with the peloton behind, David?
It has, Mike, and I think that looking at that slope, and thanks to our chaps who press the buttons on the graphics, it gives people the idea, the understanding of how these people are racing up this one, because it is, would you call it a speed climb, Sean? I know that climbs are hard anyway, but is this one of those things where you can get a reasonable gear going rather than grovel gear like we had yesterday?
Well, I think this climb...
Yes. What sort of gear would you be on compared with yesterday?
Well, I think yesterday is much steeper at the Alp. If we're comparing this with the Alp, I think the Alp would be much steeper. This is, pretty gradual. There is some sections in it where it gets a bit steeper, but it will be much more of a higher gear than you would use on Alp d'Huez.
So they're still penning away with here in that yellow jersey. It's a beautiful sight of the Alps heading down towards Gap. You can probably certainly find it on your maps there. And there normally the snow comes down. It's beautiful countryside, and we understand looking back down there that there's been a long split, and quite a big number of riders in that split at the moment though. So almost two pelotons forming now, one little group on the front. Who's left at the front at the moment, Sean? If you had time to joggle the figures, because it's all happening pretty quickly right now.
Well, we have McGee and we have De Luca and Garmendia in the front, and then and a chasing group of 7 riders with Bettini, Jaksk, Perron, Acevedo, and they have the leaders. The bunch is 130 down on the leading group of De Luca, and the chasing group that's 20 seconds behind our 3 leaders.
So they don't seem to be too concerned about that at the moment, do they? The US Postals have the original sort of flurry had at the bottom was going a quick weight of knots and seemed to blow 1 or 2 of the people out of the back. But it's settled, looks to me, Sean, a bit of what I call a steady rhythm now. How would you rate it?
Yes, it looks like they're settling down to a steadier rhythm, but I think the problem is when they start pulling the groups back as well, even though they're big groups, you have the attacks going again, and it's a problem. We've seen it there when they were a group away. It was a bit too big, and the US Postal team had to take it back, but immediately they were a lot of riders attacking again, so they're probably saying to themselves, this group out front is probably a bit big, because if they come together, you have 10 riders. It might be a little bit strong, but if they keep this pace, they won't pull out a huge gap on the climb. 130 down at the moment, so that's nothing really to worry about at this moment.
And you're watching on television. This is Eurosport's coverage of the stage today. We just switched on. It's stage 9 of the Tour de France, going from Bourg-d'Oisans to Gap, 184 kilometres on this, the 14th of July. I love this. What's this, a hammer? It's an Irish hammer. It's in green, white, and it's got to be some of your mates. Come on, Sean.
Yes, I met them yesterday actually when I went out for a short run on Alpe d'Huez. They were getting ready to go down to the start, and they're from, I think from Drogheda. There was people from Drogheda there, and there was also people from Dundalk, which is a bit further up. So I can't remember which was which, but there was two groups I met when I was out for well, you could really call it a walk, because when you try and jog on top of Alpe d'Huez and when you're not really fit, that's the time you realise the air is oxygen is so short up there, and I certainly felt that yesterday when I tried to do a bit of running.
That's the important thing. We didn't have time yesterday, did we, Sean, in the race to bring out that fact about the thinness. I remember a couple of years ago now, I was up there for certain part. I was running too up there, exactly the same thing. You can't, when you're breathing, you can't put the same effort in. Yet the riders went up there yesterday. I mean, the record was just under 38 minutes for that 13-kilometre climb, and people don't realise that watching what's going on. That thinness of the air up there, and it's just. But when you raced up there, were you aware of the thinness when you were racing up there? Was it just something you found since you started taking it easy, laughing, working for Eurosport, and driving our Mercedes at a great rate of knots?
Well, I think it's something when you get a bit unfitter, you certainly notice it. And I think the way you can notice is like when I do a bit of running here on the normal altitudes, and then you go up to Alpe d'Huez and you try and do a bit of running, and you feel it immediately. And I certainly did yesterday. But as the bikers come, you do a long stage, you come to the bottom of Alpe d'Huez, the body's getting tired, and you think it's just that the body's getting weak. You don't really get the comparison in that way. So as a rider, it's difficult. It's more difficult to notice it. But certainly, when you just go up there in a car, you've been running at sea level for a number of weeks, and you go up there, you definitely feel it.
And I saw him coming back to viewer after his run up the Alpe d'Huez, looking a bit red in the cheeks on his way down. So now he's going back to watch the action here, as I think again Miller putting some pretty big turns in and splitting him. Is that Miller again going on the front? Looks like it.
No, I don't think so. No, I don't.
Makuti, because of Miller and Makuti are both the two of them. A bit of a go, aren't they, at the moment?
Yes, I think that is Makuti.
Right, back then to the Alpe. Well, it tries to settle down in some sort of order, which it isn't doing at the moment. Sorry to go back there, but we came on air, and the whole thing was so fast off the shovel that one point I wanted to raise out was that the arrival of television cameras was actually was the first time was up there on the Alpe d'Huez, because they started on the back to 1948, by the way, the first time that reporting was installed on television. They actually had a balloon hanging above the Parc des Princes, and it could actually send the pictures to the Eiffel Tower, and then it was taken on by 3 different cameras, and people saw it for the first time. And then in 1952, after that balloon at the Parc des Princes, they decided then that they would have a cameraman going along. And what he did was the cameraman was working there amongst the top riders, and once they got to the finish, a motorbike went vroom, straight back down to the railway station, sent it on through to Paris, and then they developed it into television film, and it went out on TV. That was 1952, much better than 1948, when they had this balloon above the finish at Parc des Princes, sending its pictures to the Eiffel Tower, and then across France too as well. So just sort of put you in the picture how historic that climb was, and we were there for the 23rd time, and it did an enormous amount of damage to the overall situation. And coming into the stage today, the situation is on the general classification. A quick rundown on the top 10 place of those who have not seen it yet. We didn't have our normal opening part of the programme when Mike Smith would take you down the general classification, so I'll just give you the top 10 as follows. Armstrong is leading on the general classification. Riding for US Postal is in the yellow jersey. You'll see him amongst his US Postal team here as well. In second spot is Bilocchi at 40 seconds from the Once team, the Spanish rider. In third is Mayo at 1 minute and 10 seconds. So those are the top 3 as we go to Mike Smith and this heart rate monitor.
Yeah, well, it's not my heart rate monitor, David, because my heart, I can assure you, at the moment is reasonably relaxed. But Patrice Algon is the man with this special heart rate monitor on today. And as you can see, he's almost up to 80% of his capacity at the moment. He's beating quite merrily. It's in the high 130s. Still some little way to go before he goes into the red. So he's okay for the moment. This is a new feature of our coverage of the Tour de France here this year, thanks to Polar and their new system whereby they can relay the heart monitor rate, the heart rate, through this special thing that they have produced this year, back to the team car, which in turn is sending it to us here in our studios in Paris, so that we can show it to you. There we are.
Thank you for that, Mike. And also involved with the heart too, that there's a charity involved with the Tour de France this year, which is there for the operations that go on for the children who have problems with the heart. And so the little teddy bears round here called Little Heart, and that's the mascot which is here with us. And many of the people like Crédit Lyonnais, Champion, and the various parts we're going through are supporting this charity. It's a charity which is set up to help the underprivileged children with heart malfunctions to have operations that cannot be performed in their own countries. They're bringing children from other parts of the world, and nearly 600 children have been given a second chance in their lives. So it's an amazing charity. It's part of the Tour de France, being the 100th anniversary here, and the charity, the Merchant Chirurgie Cardiaque, and it's that very special charity indeed. It was founded in 1996 by Professor Francine Leca, head of the pediatric cardiosurgery unit at the Necker Hospital in Paris. I think it's great then that across the world we do have underprivileged children, the countries where they don't have the medical facilities that we in Western Europe do have, and that there's a heart charity going round with this one. And they're also involved with the great performance on the 27th of July when 10,000 amateur cyclists will ride through the streets of Paris. And I think that's all again to do with the money they're going to gather from that great ride. 10,000 amateur cyclists riding around the circuit in the streets of Paris on 27th of July. A worthy charity, so it isn't just a great big sporting spectacle for the public on the side of the road and you watching television. It's also, there are charities involved in the race this year, and if you see a chance then I think it's a jolly good idea to support them. Oops, back with the chamois, is it? Yes, it is. Oops, here we go. No one else sit on chamois. That's nice, isn't it, eh? I was talking about the wildlife, and we haven't seen any wolves. They're a bit further south from here, by the way, but there was a lovely shot on our cameras. Yes, Sean, you were pointing. I thought something had fallen off.
No, we've just went over the top of the Lotre there, and I think it was De Luca. I did not see the shot. Difficult to see De Luca and the Kelme or Para. I'm not sure which of them went over the summit first.
So we're going back to the heart rate monitor. We're trying then to get it on our screens here, because I was rabbiting on about the hearts, and there they are beating another one, getting towards the top of this climb, and then we'll update you on the overall situation. It was De Luca, Para and Jaschke 1, 2 and 3 after kilometre 38 over the Passage au Sommet de l'Autoré. And first time we came over was 1910 or thereabouts, and now on this 2003 edition the name of De Luca will go up there, Para second and Jaschke third. Here we go, Sean, I'm sorry, Mike.
Yes, well, that's Philippe Gaumont, of course, who is a teammate of David Miller's, and as you can see, his heart was pumping a little bit harder than the riders we saw before. Obviously, he was putting in a little bit more of an effort, or maybe, of course, your heart rate will go up a little if you're suffering and you're struggling and you're having to use more of an effort to keep up, whereas if you're on the top of your form and you're feeling quite comfortable with the pace, then even on that same gradient as the guy next to you is suffering, you will probably have a much lower heartbeat than that poor fella. So it's some indication, I think, when we see these heart rate monitor figures, graphics, David, it's some indication, I think, as to whether a rider is feeling comfortable or not.
All happening back here, and the question will be how much damage is being done at the front, and Pat Sean can update us on beyond those three riders which we saw go over the top there, De Luca, Para and Jaschke, the rest of those who are hanging on for grim death.
Yes, well, we had in that leading group there were 6 riders. As we said, De Luca was there, McGee, Garmendia, Moncortiz, and Perini, Lopez, de Montaigne and Para. and there was also a group behind which was not too far off with Yakska, which we see is very active in this breakaway. And the gap, as we see at the moment, is going for 3 minutes. As we said, the US Postals, I think, are settling it down the pace and just going to keep on working at this, and not allow the gap to grow enormously big. Anything like 10 or 12 minutes, I don't think we will see that.
Well, just over 3 minutes back to the yellow jersey, and the main field then stringing its way over here as the breakaway group go down the other side. What happened to Miller then, Sean?
Well, Miller, we haven't seen Miller for the past while. He was active there when that group was the 15 riders. He attacked out of that. He tried to form a smaller group, I would say, was his tactic, but they got pulled back, and it seems to be his teammate is up there now, Muncoty, so maybe it was a plan of action for the team, and certainly if he has somebody up there, I think he must be back in the main bunch with Armstrong at the moment.
With the flowing blonde locks, Pelazzotti dropping down like a stone as they go down towards the valley below, and then up the next big climb of the day, the Col du Glandon. Good look here at Pelazzotti on his way down, trying to keep a good pace on the way down. His lovely De Rosa bicycle, magnificent looking bikes. De Rosa used to make bikes for Eddie Merckx all those years gone by. Eddie Merckx, one of the riders that won the Tour de France 4 times, and there we're going back to Chotier. Lucky Para and Garmendia were the riders that went over the top of that climb. A lovely again where we saw De Rosa, which is a great famous Italian bike manufacturer. To see Bianchi back in the pack again is terrific, and nice to get close-ups on those Bianchi bicycles, and it's good to see that they're the only manufacturer of bicycles at the moment that actually is in there sponsoring a team on its own. It hasn't happened in recent years because the cost is enormous, but they rescued the remnants of the Coast team, drafted in another sponsor to help them out, and also through Hanograph. And Tony Grimaldi, the boss of the Bianchi team, began to put together a team which you're seeing on the screen with Ulrich, their #1 man. It dates back, by the way, the Bianchi team over 115 years, and way back in 1915, for instance, they built a full suspension military bicycle, which was ahead of it at the time as regards front and rear suspension, because that's what they did on that bike. And of course, people like Fausto Coppi, Gimondi, Morin, Argentan, Bugno and Pantani all rode Bianchi bikes in the past too as well. It's an amazing company, and I've had good fortune many years ago to go to the factory and see in there their museum where they've got Coppi's bikes and their continuation. Many of the big manufacturers sort of turned their back on the racing side and just went into mass producing bikes, many of which now are produced out of China and Thailand. Taiwan, and just they stick the badge on it. The Americans with the Trek people, they are making all their top-end bikes. They only came on the scene probably about the last 15-20 years, first making mountain bicycles, and they found new technologies to go through, and that they, again, the majority of all their top-end racing bikes are made of all things in America, which has been decimated the industry by the advent of very cheap Chinese bikes. All the big manufacturers just disappeared, stopped making bicycles. Along came people like Trek and Specialized, Cannondale. I went for the top end of the business using modern technology to provide the bikes that the racing cyclists want as well. And that's what you're seeing out in the moment. Bianchi, though, has the whole spectrum of its bicycles. Yes, they do get some made out in Taiwan, I suspect also in China, but they've got a lovely factory still in Europe producing these handcrafted bikes using modern technology. As they stream down the mountain top here, as the majority of the riders are on bicycles with the main sponsor being provided, like here Cofidis, which is a credit company. If you want to get some credit on the telephone in France, you just dial the number on the back here of Moncuti's jersey, and they'll ask you a few questions, and then you can get credit to go out and buy yourself whatever you want within the credit limit they've got. The US Postal team that Lance Armstrong is riding for, well, that's self-explanatory in the Postals, but the Post is, you say, why does an American postal company want to advertise itself? Well, they do have big business in Europe, particularly the transmission of parcels and special documents and so on, and they want to get the people over here to know about US Postal, and they have many other subsidiary companies like Berry Floor in Belgium who put the money into the kit as well. The orange jersey you see just there as they go past Euskaltel, they Escudi was originally a Basque team which was funded by Basque people who just loved the sport. Various big manufacturers or whatever manufacturer they might be founded the team, and they put up subscription money from the people and these manufacturers, and just became the Escudi team, which was really a national team riding for their sponsor. And Esquetel came along and helped them out, and it looks like their sponsorship might go at the end of this season, but I think the way in which the performance of Mayo was going, I'm sure there'll be a queue of sponsors to keep that team going. Here we are, Brad McGee, the Australian ex-world champion. He going off the front, riding for F de Jeu, which is the equivalent of the lottery in Great Britain. Up the top of the climb now, and we are going at a great rate of knots with the US Postal on the way down.
I think we're back on air.
We are, yes, and we picked him up. Sean's been jotting down all the people here. It just came up, by the way, the last one which got on our screen, 16th spot, was Chavanel, and the Payot Maillot Jaune at 3:10, so that's quite a big gap opening up there, Sean. 3 minutes 10 seconds, Chavanel leading over the Maillot Jaune. In fact, the peloton at one time 3:8, now back to 3:10, and I think we managed to locate most of the riders who were in that leading group. Miller seems to have disappeared from it. They were the last man over the line, or just leading the peloton, Chavanel, with the Maillot Jaune peloton at 3 minutes and 10 seconds. Just confirming, over the top of the summit de Col de Lotre, the first man was De Luca, second was Para, and Jaska was in third spot. So we've lost David Miller by the looks of it. We don't quite know, because many things going on, exactly where he dropped off, but he has now gone, and the situation then at the top of that climb, Sean.
Well, the 16 riders still out in front, and as you said, you know, De Luca, Para, Garmendia, Casero, Jaska, Lopez de Munhain, McGee, Moncotti, Zampiri, Pelzalotta, and then at 45 seconds we had Lastras Perron, at 54 seconds we had Charrera, at 1:12 we had Fletcher, then we had Bettini at 2:12, 2:20 Chavanel, and at 3:10 the yellow jersey of Armstrong and what's left of the main bunch.
Going then to Le Motier-les-Bains, and Les Bains means bath when they get up there, but the riders here, no time to take an early quick bath indeed. Le Motier-les-Bains, they're going through here. Nice little church, by the way, dates back to the 15th century and rebuilt in the 17th century. We might be able to see it then as the camera goes up towards it. It's an old market town, very narrow streets indeed, and surrounded by lots of little, you'll see hamlets in the distance. Nice little part of the world. It owes its name to the Benedict Priory, founded in the 9th century by Saint Elrada, Abbot of Novelese, and he actually miraculously delivered the country from a plague of snakes, it says here. Plague of snakes. Ugh, that's one thing I can put up with anything but snakes. You know, we all have our pet foibles, don't we? Whether it's spiders or what have you, but snakes to me, yuck. I can't put up with it. And oh my goodness, it's back to Vietnam, and the helicopters going across the sky. They're not splattered on your screen like little flies or something. And like, thanks to Sean Kelly for cleaning the windscreen of our smart Mercedes today and the front end of the car. The best is immaculate, but having come here and great rate of knots, and yesterday great rate of knots too, we seem to have wiped out most of the insects in this part of the world, splattered on the windscreen, and that was not some of them there. Those were the helicopters zooming along. Helicopters, some of them are doing the job, beaming the signals back to the point where we're at Gap, so it can be then transmitted via the big satellite dishes up into the sky and to you people back at home watching them. Some of them are carrying VIPs up there too. Some of them are prepared, also ready if there is an accident, to take off the injured off to hospital, and also up there the police use their helicopters too as well. And cycling is a very quiet sport normally. You do get the whoosh of the wheels, but on the Tour de France, before the race comes through, you get the publicity cavalcade. There's music blaring and people having fun and throwing out all sorts of goodies to people on the side of the road. It gets very noisy, then it goes quiet, and then 1 or 2 cars go zoom through with the lead press going through, and then it begins to build as you sort of sense the number of vehicles coming through with it. The race is coming, then the helicopter comes that's doing the shots you see here, the noise of it going through, and the whole razzmatazz, and then when it's gone through you hear the cars going through, and after that silence, and the race has gone, and you have to wait another 12 months if the race comes through, and it's all over and done with. It whims past in maybe no more than I don't know, between 2 minutes and up to 10 minutes before the front and back of the race going through, depending exactly where they are, and that's over and done with. But you have seen the big publicity cavalcade, you have felt the drama of the whole thing. If you've got a radio, you've heard it coming over the radio. If you're near a bar, you can see it on television, and then you go, and the whole thing goes through, and just to catch a glimpse of your champions going past, picking out, you see people pointing, this and that, and here we are waving it through with their little PMU green large hands that they've got, these cardboard cutout hands. PMU, sponsors of the points jersey, give these out along the way, and the people wave these things as they go through, and they look for these souvenirs and they take them back with them all across the world. And as we came down yesterday, they were taking more than the souvenirs given away. As we watched the barriers, the barriers, there are great big banners on there, all rolled up advertising certain products, and 1 or 2 of the public were busy helping themselves to the banners to take them a souvenir. I can't imagine anybody's bedroom where you can put a 12-foot banner. Maybe they're going to sort of put it across the roof of the house. I don't know. Anyway, souvenir hunters are there on the way through, and they're also then going to watch this race go through on this then of the Tour de France, the stage from Bourg-d'Oisans to Gap, stage 9 the race, and Mike Smith has some more graphics for you to look at now. Mike.
Well, David, one of the riders we've been watching in recent days has been Gilberto Simoni, because he's had his problems on 1 or 2 days, and he's one of obviously a number of riders in the Tour de France who also rode in the Giro d'Italia, which is only a few weeks back in time. If you think about the way the season is and the dates of the 2 big races, there's not an enormous gap between the 2, and sadly it has to be said that those who did ride in the Tour of Italy, not just Simoni but 1 or 2 others, are not faring very well here in the Tour de France. As you can see, Cacchioli is the best placed rider of those who rode in the Giro and are here. He's 16th. Stefano Gozzelli, a former winner of the Giro of course, is 17th, and Toshnig 19th. But if you look at those riders who didn't go to the Giro but chose one of the other stage races, the Dauphiné Libéré is one, and also the Tour of Switzerland, you've got some riders who rode in Switzerland who are doing very well here. Vinokurov, who we saw brilliantly finish in 2nd place behind Iban Mayo, he's currently 4th on general classification, and Jan Ullrich chose the Swiss Tour as his final preparation for this year's Tour de France, and he's ranked 8th. So there's a marked difference at the moment between those who rode in the Tour of Italy and those who rode in the Tour of Switzerland and the Dauphiné Libéré. Libéré coming up on your screen, and this is going to be really interesting. Look at this, David. The ones who rode in the Dauphiné: Armstrong, currently lying in 1st place, yellow jersey. Mayo, winner of yesterday's stage, he's currently in 3rd place. Manchebo, he also rode the Dauphiné, in 5th place. Tyler Hamilton, who rode the Dauphiné despite the shoulder injury, unbelievable, 6th place overall. So it would perhaps suggest that riding the Giro and riding the Tour de France together in one season is not necessarily a successful thing. And of course the records show not many men have in fact done well in both tours in the same year.
I've just been whipping through my vast file of facts and figures, which I cart round with my pilot bag, which my colleagues here call my computer. And I've been looking down here. It says here that 1983, Paris-Nice Critère International, la route Tour de Suisse en classement par points, laureate de classement par points, and so on. 1983, sure, it looked like you used the Tour de France when you went Tour de Suisse, when you went on to take the points in the Tour de France, 1983. Probably did it many other times too, though. Did you find that a good stepping stone?
Yes, I found the Tour of Switzerland was a good preparation for the Tour of France, and it always served me well. But I think if you look back the last number of years, did Armstrong not try the Tour of Switzerland 2 years ago? Certainly did in the last 3 years. I think it was 2 or 3 years ago he did the Tour of Switzerland. He actually, I think he won the Tour of Switzerland, and he would have went on to win the Tour. So You know, there's I'd say quite a number, if we look back through the records, that did do the Tour of Switzerland and went on to win the Tour de France.
Armstrong won the Tour of Switzerland in 2001. You're quite right about that. And I can look back here, actually, Jan Ullrich way back in 1997, finishing in 3rd spot. So many of those, and of course Ullrich used the Tour of Switzerland that time, I think, when he went on to win the Tour de France. And I remember him riding so well there too, and came out in fine form. So it's a good stepping stone. You're right there, Mike, that it does have its opportunity of providing good things. Although 1 or 2 riders like Alex Sullivan won it last year, didn't use it as a stepping stone to go on. So it depends, I suppose, what your sponsors want and how you're going to go about it. But they were up, going back then to the Tour de Switzerland. In fact, Sean Kelly won it in 1990. Robert Miller was second, and Hampston was third. The first 1, 2 and 3 English-speaking Tour de Switzerland victors. Back in with these 10 riders in the lead. Sean will put you in the picture. Before we went to break, we were discussing with Mike Smith back in Newcastle. He got the hair running about the usefulness of riding the Tour of Switzerland and going in to ride the Tour de France. And I did refer to the fact that Sean had ridden it rather well. But going back to the record books, in a little break there, I'm sure that Mike Smith's probably doing the same thing. Sean did win the Tour of Switzerland in 1990. Amazing year that was, because Robert Miller was second and Andy Hampston was third. So we got English-speaking riders, excuse the expression, because one from Ireland, one from Scotland, one from America. I think there's a joke there somewhere. Kelly, Miller and Hampston. That was Robert Miller, not of course David Miller, in 1990. And I spotted that one and made Sean smile a bit and embarrassed and coloured up. And then I went back further in 1983 when he won the Tour of Switzerland. And interesting enough, in 1983, Peter Vinham was in 2nd spot. Peter Vinham has been a man who's won the Alpe d'Huez twice, so I haven't had time to go back through to see if that year, 1983, when Peter Winnan got the 2nd spot in the Tour of Switzerland, well, that took him on into a good spot in the Tour de France. But it does show you it's a very nice race. It's well worth going out and seeing the Tour of Switzerland, if you can put it on your agenda. It's much more relaxed than the Tour de France, which can be a bit, I won't say oppressive at any time, but certainly it's a good stepping stone. And I've just found, today, flicking through the record books, that in 1983, when Sean Kelly was first in the Tour of Switzerland, won it overall, Peter Vinnan, who was second, went on in 1983 to get the stage victory for the TI Rally team up the Alpe d'Huez. And so his comment on that day was, it's crazy that I won that stage. I felt bad all day. Well, Peter Vinnan, second in the Tour of Switzerland in 1983, going on then to win the Alpe d'Huez stage in the Tour de France. Enough from the record books. How about that, Mike? You okay? I'm trying to pinch your job. Are you happy?
No, not at all, actually, David. But I'll throw one back at you. Did you know that Peter Winnan was actually the 2nd youngest winner ever on Alpe d'Huez? He was only 23 and so many weeks or whatever. The youngest ever was Lucho Herrera from Colombia when he won in 1984. He was 23, but just a little younger than Peter Winnan. So there you are. There's just a little extra piece of anorak information for you, David.
Well, I hope, Mike, that you and your statistics and little things you dig out while we're rapping on here will satisfy those dyed-in-the-wool anoraks you say about cycling, because I in particular will sort of go off at a tangent and talk about the scenery, the countryside, the food, the wine, and forget to come back to the race from time to time. But there you are, stabilising the whole situation. We had the gorgeous Christie coming on shortly with the comments from the riders out there, and Sean Kelly is giving a rundown of what's happening while my eyes are elsewhere. Not on Christie, but on the bits of paper. Sean, perhaps you can update, and so that both the anoraks and normal viewers can understand what's happening.
At the moment we have there was 10 riders and 4, but these 4 chasers has joined up with the 10 leaders, and we have the 14 riders are De Luca, Parra, Garmendia, Casero, Yaxca, Lopez de Monin, McGee, Moncotti, Zampieri, Pelzolotti, Lastras, Perron, Charrera and Fletcher. And the bunch, the last time check, was around the 2:10.
So that, once they're holding it, they're actually chipping back a bit, because I think the maximum it got to was 3:10, wasn't it, Sean?
Yes, it's after coming down a bit, and you know, the 4 riders coming back would say that the 10 out front, that they weren't really going at 100%, because if they were, it would have been more difficult for the 4 chasers to come back. So that proves that they're not riding at 100% up front.
But is that something to do with the fact we've got the Col du Glandon ahead of them? When they get over the top of that, they're not exactly halfway point, but they're going through 86 kilometre racing so far. Would that be bearing in the back? Because it's an oak category climb, isn't it? Going up the top of that one, the Izard, which Mike would give us the little slices of the well, it isn't cheese now, it's multicoloured graphics. It's a 19.4 kilometre climb at 5.9%. Would that be in the back of their mind? So they're sort of stabilising things.
Yes, certainly it would be. When you see there's wars up ahead, it would put you thinking, and you would be trying to spare a bit of energy. And I think a lot of the riders are thinking about that at the moment. That's why up front the 10 weren't really going at 100%. And also after that there's a long road here to Gap, and a lot of hard road as well. In the end, it's not big mountains, but it's pretty undulating stuff. So the riders are thinking about the road ahead, and I suppose the breakaway, they don't want to start riding full out at the moment, because if they do, well then they're going to have problems in the end to finish strongly.
And the Col du Glandon lying ahead of these riders, 2,361 metres above sea level. First crossed in 1922 by Theiss, and then famous names like Pelissier, France and so on went on through. Even Severi Mays in 1936. Mays is M-A-E-S. He gave his name to a handlebar shape that he designed, and Mays handlebars became the in thing when sports bikes in the sort of 50s were beginning to become popular back in Great Britain. You had to have a cycle of your bike on the specifications as Mays handlebars. I don't think anybody had an understanding what on earth it was all about. It was just sort of thing that you put like derailleur gear, but it's Mays handlebars. You had to have Mays handlebars. A particular sort of square shape that he used in 1936 became the in shape for so many years. In fact, he won again out in 1939 over the top of, or first over the top of the Izard, and again he really sort of established himself on that great climb. There's some great names been over the top. Bartali's been over the top in first spot. Robic, Fausto Coppi, Louis Bobe has been up there three times he's been over the top as well. The great man, the Eagle of Toledo, Bahamontes, over in 1958, again in 1962. Eddie Merckx, gosh, he could do anything. He could sprint, he could climb, he could go for the Points Championship Tour as well. He went over in 1972 in first spot. Then Fuente, that gifted Spanish climber, in 73. Thévenet is 75. He's not sitting far away from us, past winner of the Tour de France. He was over the top there in first place. And that great climber Van Impe, also a winner of the Tour de France, was over the top in first spot, followed by 86 Chozas, 89 Pascal Richard, 1993 none other than Claudio Chiappucci, and the year 2000 it was Botero that went over in first spot. Well, Botero went on to win the polka dot jersey in the Tour de France that year, but at the moment he's struggling. He got dropped yesterday. He took an awful pasting, and just shows you how from within 2 years he's suddenly found he's lost his climbing legs. But he did win the World Time Trial Championship last year, but yesterday he came in 147th, 42 minutes and 19 seconds down. That was a man who went over the top of the Col du Glandon, who's now struggling to stay with the race, but he just said he's completely lost form and doesn't know where it's gone to. But that's bike racing for you. Any cyclist out there listening to this knows exactly what it's like. You come into a certain season and you're grovelling on the same training program. You go through the same routine, and somehow the legs just don't work. Well, Botero, unfortunately, he with the blue eyes, I mentioned that because Christie has mentioned that already, is now at the back, a bit bloodshot, I should think, because he just doesn't seem to have any fire in his legs. Sean, it looks like there's a bigger regroupment going on now. We've had so much activity so far, but they now are regrouping as we're just dropping down into the valley before we start the next climb. It really just happens down one side and straight up the other. We're going through Briançon and then down into the valley and out on the climb up the other side for the Haute category climb, the Col du Glandon. The group getting larger after the first burst on the banjo of the Col de Lotre. It was very fragmented on the way up. They went at a great rate of knots. It did split the field, and then slowly they're coming back together. And Sean, how do you feel? Is this the lull before the storm? As here we are in Briançon, a place, by the way, with magnificent traffic jams every time the Tour de France finishes here. Sean?
Yes, well, I wonder what's going to happen. You know, the main rivals of the Armstrong, you know, some of them have riders up there, like the Escatel riders. Will they start, you know, firing more riders off on this climb of the Izoard? You know, we must remember that at the moment there's 121 kilometers to go, so a long ways to the finish. I don't think we will see the favourites attacking, but then after yesterday, the confidence is going to be after being built with them, because it was the first time that we see guys really able to attack Armstrong for a number of years, and they might have got, you know, really the morale rocket high. So you never know what could happen on this climb.
And they begin to move out on towards that climb. The break at the front, we're just going to say, coming through Briançon. It's the highest town in Europe, by the way. It's 1,321 metres above sea level, the highest town in Europe. And when the Tour de France finishes here, I can guarantee a blockage which lasts for at least the next 12 months. No, I'm joking, but every time we've been here, and in fact even the riders are complaining the last time we came, because all their vehicles got stuck. The incoming traffic from different directions wanted to get into town, came to a halt. Nobody could get in, nobody could get out, and it took an awful long time to get out of that town, which has fortifications built in 17th century to plans by Vauban, who also, you saw that Notre Dame collegiate church which came up on our screens. Back then to Mike Smith and some more graphics for you.
Well, this is a very important graphic, this one, David, because this is the feature climb of the day, the hors catégorie Col de l'Izoard, out of category, not a fourth, not a third, not a second, not even a first category climb, and you can see why. In the middle is a very, very steep part. You've just seen the little blue line go through it, and that, I think, is sure to do all sorts of damage, both to the lead group and to the peloton. Not for nothing have they put this in the Tour de France this year, David. It is a feature climb. You've been going through some of the great names who've been first over the top in the past. I wonder who will add his name to that little bit of glory by going over the top. 19 kilometres, well, about 19 and a half anyway. Average gradient just about 6%, but in parts, as you can see, a lot steeper than that. Just before I hand back to you, David, there's another interesting thing about today's stage, which I think we've not mentioned so far. You've got the same manual on the Tour de France that I've got, the yellow book. You mentioned it earlier, and you pointed out quite rightly, the riders have just gone through Briançon. Now then, they went through Briançon at 1:36. And the organisers of the Tour de France, for those who've not heard about this before, they give each day a schedule of expected times based on 3 different average speeds. And even on the fastest speed that the organisers have estimated for this particular stage, they shouldn't have been in Briançon until 1:52. So, David, thanks to that fast climb earlier on at the Col du Glandon, they're already 16 minutes up on the fastest expected schedule. How about that?
Yeah, it must take it over 40 kilometres an hour. It's over 25 miles an hour, Mike. Thanks for pointing that out, because certainly have been going a bit quickly. And I love that bit then about not a first, not a second, not a third, but an oak category. It's like when you go to a nice little market town, and the man is selling plates off the back of a lorry. I'm not asking £10. I'm not asking...
Thank you, David.
I'm asking 5. Give me 3 quid. I know where you got trained.
You can call me Mike Boy, not Del Boy, Mike Boy. All right.
You must have sold plates in the market.
No,
that was lovely, Mike. Thanks for that.
You're welcome.
No. Okay, thanks to Mike putting the picture. It's not at first, not a second, not a third. Roll up, roll. Yes, you at the back on 3 plays. Good. Get the money off the gentleman there. There's nobody buying them. It's an old trick when you're selling on the marketplace. No, I've merely watched them. I haven't been there, nor has Mike. Mike Smith in the dungeon of Paris. We're updating you on the graphics and so on. Excuse the frivolity from time to time if we do go off at a tangent for those dedicated cyclists, but we are in the seat all the way through, a plastic seat on this occasion, not one of those little sharp saddles they've got down there for the Tour de France. This is stage 9 from Bourg-d'Oisans to Gap. They come through Briançon. They've got 184 kilometres to go, and they start out this morning at 11:45 Central European time. For those who are back in Great Britain on British Eurosport, that was 10:45, and they're going to ride right the way through. We're with you until we finish. Well, it's going to be the fastest time. It's going to be 15 minutes to 5, but they like to finish, I think, the way they're going, much faster than that. So we beyond 4:45, we might be finished something a bit sooner than that, maybe 4:30. We'll wait and see. It might slow down towards the end. That's, of course, CET time, 3:30 for you back in Great Britain. I think it's Monday at the moment. It is, of course, Bastille Day. It's the 14th of July, when the Great Revolution took place, and the Bastille was broken into, and the poor people in there were taken away out of the dungeons. Not Mike Smith today on the 14th. He's got to stay there until we get to Paris on the coming Friday. And then perhaps we'll release him, because the Tour de France on its final loop does go down past the Place de Bastille. The old prison doesn't exist there any longer, but there's a great big monument sticking up in the sky about the size of the monument in Trafalgar Square to Nelson. It's one like that, a great ornate thing to remember the great days of the Bastille Day. I don't have time to mention when we get in towards the finish, by the way, but Sean Kelly just advised me not to walk on the painted decoration, because beyond the finishing line, after you see the signs for Fiat, there's a red, white and blue tricolour, and it runs for about 300 metres straight past the finish, down towards the barricades at the far end, where various people are trying to come into the VIP lounge and so on. They painted the whole of the road, well, the central section they have here in Gap, in red, white and blue. It is the great day, the 14th of July, and when Sean spotted me walking, I said, hey, he said, that's for the French to walk upon. So I got out of the way very quickly indeed, in case I got locked in the local equivalent of the Bastille. Right, we've been ravaging on a bit. The race is now, I have, up the mountain, up toward the top of the Col du Glandon, and the pace being set very fierce indeed. They've been averaging still something in excess of 25 miles an hour, this very hot stage into Gap. This is the leading group of riders, 115 kilometres to go. Sean, let's have an update on who's in this group of riders. It seems to have settled down quite a bit recently, but it could all change on the way up. So let's see who's in that group.
Yes, well, we have the 14 riders, but some of them have the losing contact. We have 8 riders in the front group, but the group was Deluca from Seco, Para, Kelme, Garmendia, Casero from Bianchi, Yax from Once, which we see setting a very strong pace on the climb at the moment. Lopez de Monheim from Escatel, McGee from Francaise de Joux, Moncotti from Cofidis, Zampieri from Calderola, and Pelzolottia from Alezio. And then we had Lastras, Perron, CSE, Charlier from AG2R, and Fletcher from Banesto. As I said, Yaxke is setting a very strong pace, and at the moment there are around the 8 riders in the leading group, and the others have just lost a little bit of contact.
And just hanging on the back at the moment, the jersey of the Australian national champion, and that was Stuart O'Grady, who had a spirited breakaway a few days ago and got within just a few hundred yards going to Lyon before he got snapped up by the chasing group. Sean, as they're settling down here, and we're not at the halfway point. We've got tomorrow's stage running down to Marseille, and then we go to rest day. Looking back what's happened so far, Pataki win those 4 stages, then getting sick and unable to go on the stage in Molsine, and was out of the race. We've seen the French taking the polka dot jersey, the French then taking the yellow jersey twice, and now the race is coming up. In case people have been away for a week and haven't caught up with it, just switching on to this race, just your look back at the race so far and how interesting it's been or not been.
Well, I think it's been a very heavy race this year, very hard, very fast. The flat stages, the riders who are climbers have suffered a bit. I think nervously they have suffered a lot, and because of that we have a lot of tired riders, and we see yesterday and today a lot of riders losing contact very, very quickly.
And let's see how the heartbeats are going to see if they can keep in contact. This is Gaumont and Mike Smith.
Yeah, no, well, it's not me, David, but I know what you mean. It's Philippe Gaumont who's pounding away out there. Remember, he's a teammate of David Miller's. Gaumont is back in this lead chase group, which contains the US Postals on the front as ever. He's probably tucked in there somewhere behind and still working very, very hard. 80% of capacity. So it's tough out there on the start of this climb as we see these wonderful scenic views from the helicopter as we go on this climb to the top of l'Izoard. So I reckon there's a lot of guys there whose hearts are pounding quite heavily, and they'll be pounding even more heavily when they get to that steep section midway up the climb of this hors catégorie mountain.
And as looking back at this beautiful scenery, Mike, you did mention at the early part of our programme, but we've been going now for quite a bit, and do bear in mind we didn't have much chance to talk to viewers about the monitor scheme. Perhaps you'd like to just run through it again as they're going down here on this little bit of a descent, just how it all operates and what's going on.
Well, heart monitors have been around for quite a few years now, David. Even I, at my lowly level, put one on when I'm on my turbo trainer at home in my little sun lounge, just to see.
No.
Yeah, I really do, just to make sure that it's still going. You know,
You
it's a
show
reassurance. Anyway, it's a band around the chest with a sensor on it, which obviously can sense the heartbeat. As we have David Miller at the back here, is he in a little bit of trouble, perhaps, David, or is he just waiting for the team car and maybe some drinks? We'll have to wait and see. Anyway, whilst we watch Miller here, just off the back of the peloton, yeah, the heart monitors have been around a while, and of course the pulse is directed from the heart to the sensor, and from the sensor by a little radio transmitter to something that looks very similar to a wristwatch, which the riders would have strapped on the handlebar so that they can see what rate they're going at the moment. So the next development was from Polar to produce one which could transmit this not just from the sensor to the rider's strap thing on the handlebar. Look at that, for that wonderful barrage there. But now so that it can transmit back to the team car, which is some distance away, so the signal's got to be a little bit stronger. They've managed to perfect this now so that the team managers can sit in the car and monitor their riders, make sure that they're not going over the top, and of course if they're not beating too hard enough, they can perhaps send a message to them saying, hey, you perhaps got to work a little bit harder, fella, your heart's not beating fast enough. So it is that little bit of extra information to the teams in the team cars to make sure that their riders are where they should be, heart rate wise.
In my case, I think I have an egg timer strapped to my exercise bike, the speed I go at. No, I joke. It's a good way of keeping fit in the winter. And have you got one of these turbo trainers, Mike, or you got one of these static things?
Well, I started off with, years ago, with the old free-running rollers, like most of us had, with two big rollers at the back onto which the rear wheel rested, and another single roller onto which the front wheel rested. And the rollers were connected front and back by a rubber band sort of arrangement, thick rubber band, obviously very, very thick. And that was free rolling. But more recently, of course, for those who don't know about turbo trainers and the more high-tech part of cycle training, the static thing now into which you lock your back wheel, that's the usual type. The front wheel doesn't go round at all, as we have a good look at. I think this is David Moncoutier we're looking at the moment. So
yeah, he's starting off, yeah.
Yeah, he is. Most decent cyclists, I don't particularly include myself in that, I'm just a bike rider, but most decent cyclists...
You're an indecent cyclist.
will have one of these, not just during the winter, but most of the time they'll do one, possibly two sessions a week. Some of the short distance time trialists, David, they don't go out on their bikes at all. All they do is train on the turbo and then ride a Saturday afternoon 10-mile time trial, which I think is a little bit negative, and I don't class people like that real cyclists. I realise I'll get emails about that now, but most people who know me know that that is my opinion. But it is nonetheless a very, very useful addition to training on the road, particularly in the winter time, I feel, David. As I've got older, I've found I've not wanted to go out in the cold and icy roads perhaps during the winter, but I can still keep myself in reasonable condition by banging the bike on the turbo trainer and doing half an hour, sometimes 60 minutes indoors in the comparative warmth. The shower's only 2 minutes away. I think it's a wonderful addition to a rider's training programme.
Now then, Mike, we'll continue and then come back to Sean Kelly as this is going on. He's but how long do you stay on this machine?
Well, I normally do around 30, 45 minutes. I have been known to do an hour. The only thing is that you can't sort of, the expression that we use, David, you'll understand, you can't honk out of the saddle. Now, that's an expression which some non-cyclists might not understand, whereby you get out of the saddle on a climb and let the bicycle go to and fro between your legs on a steep incline. You can't do that, so you tend to get a little bit saddle sore. So you shouldn't do more than about 30 or 40 minutes at any one time, really.
with the field streaming down, 112 kilometres to go, and the field still with a breakaway group down the road. Moncuti having a bit of trouble to stay with it. David Miller also sagging off the back of this group at the moment, and we'll be looking at the polar monitor screen and the way in which riders can use that to aid them on their understanding of how their body is performing, and that's part of Eurosport's new transmission technique for this, the 2003 Tour de France, going from Bourg-d'Oisans to Gap, 184 kilometres in all, stage 9 of the race. And yes, many of the riders do use the monitors. In fact, they all use them anyway, and of course many of them do, under the wet and awful conditions, get on their bikes on their turbo trainers. And of course it gets a bit boring out there. Many people do use exercise bikes just to try and let the legs go around, and the one thing to do I'd recommend is to have a pair of headphones on and ride to music. And of course spinning has become a great thing, where there are spinning clubs where people go on these exercise bikes and they whiz away, and there's music playing in the background, and there's somebody taking charge of the spinning, and people go down there, goes faster, goes this, dances in, and off goes the music. And the great Russell Williams is a known spinner. He goes to clubs and these special places where people go and spin on these bicycles. The ordinary public are using them, but there's nothing better than riding a bike. And here, with the sun beating down, certainly you go out on your bike rather than getting on your indoor trainer. But Sean Kelly, I got the impression that you didn't do much on the rollers in the old days. You may say no to that. I thought you were always out, hail, rain or shine, in the early season, getting used to the conditions on the road. Did you use exercise bike, or was it out on the road?
I did use the exercise, the rollers.
The rollers, yeah.
Not a lot. If in the winter time, certainly you would go out on the road, but when you'd be racing in the beginning of season and you get a very bad day, and then you get a second day and a third day, you would maybe start using the rollers a bit. But in general, we would try and get on the road. But I think in the latter years, the riders use more of the rollers and the heart rate more. They can train the risk of being out in the cold weather because of getting tendinitis problem and getting colds. It's less when you stay indoors. But as Mike said, to do a long term on the rollers, it's difficult. But some of these pros, like, they can ride for 2 hours in the morning and 2 hours in the afternoon on the rollers, and I know some of the riders were capable of doing that, which is a very hard thing to do, because the time just goes by so slowly when you're on the rollers, as any biker know that does that.
Time going slowly for this man here, Baden Cook, in the green jersey. Interesting there, you can see the green jersey he's got here. He's got some mesh panels on it to allow the air to flow through and keep him cool. But the other interesting thing was that Stuart O'Grady went past Baden Cook just then. The Australian national champion went past Baden Cook. Cook comes from Melbourne, and O'Grady comes from Adelaide. He went past him. He didn't even say "G'day, mate," or anything like that. He just rode past him and didn't even sort of turn his head. He just went straight past. So there's probably still a bit of a needle between these Australians, because Baden Cook has got himself a stage victory already. He's got the green jersey, whereas O'Grady's been trying so hard, but he hasn't been quite there or thereabouts. So out there, not in "Good day, mate." He's just left him back there to survive on his own. What do you think of that, Sean?
Well, when you're in the position and in the state that they're in at the moment, they're really struggling here. And Cook and, as you said, O'Grady, he probably maybe made some sort of a sound when he was going by, but you're just suffering so much, and you're concentrating on what you're doing, and you just don't. If he's even a friend, you don't really take much interest in him. You just keep on working at your rhythm there and try and keep it going, and to lose as less time as possible, because if you can limit your losses on the descent, if it's not really going that fast, you can possibly come back again. And O'Grady, we've seen him, he's done that on a number of occasions, so that's probably his in his mind, that's his tactic. And to stay with the cars as well, if you can stay amongst the cars, at time you can get a bit of shelter from the rear of the cars, which we see him here doing.
Oh, he's just come back and got a drink there, so that's Stuart, determination on his. Do you go through tunnel vision? Is you just concentrating so much on what's happening in front that what's right and left of you don't even understand or don't even take note of?
Yes, very much tunnel vision. When you get into a state as those guys are in at the moment, you're just in the tunnel there, and you just focus straight in front of you. And even at times there's people on the roadside, and you're so focused in that tunnel, they shout at you, and you just even can't look at them. You just continue on, concentration, and just focus on what you're at, and try and keep concentrating on your rhythm, and giving your 100% and limit your losses, really.
As we're talking about home trainers and exercise bikes, we did pick up then Baden Cook and Siúd O'Grady. And an interesting little story that the first real, many Australians came across in raiding parties before the Second World War, and one of them started to ride the Tour de France, including the great Hubert Opperman. And so Hubert Opperman went on to become a great cyclist. He rode and broke the record. Lands End John rode first Australian to finish in the Tour de France. The poor fellow actually was riding his exercise bike at the age of 92 when he dropped off and died. Mike.
Well, it's a sad story, David, isn't it? But at 92, I suppose...
I thought you'd like that.
If you get to 92, you've not had too bad a life, really, have you?
Do this bit and I'll tell you how it happened. Off you go and I'll tell you what happened.
As you can see, we're just about halfway up this all-category climb, the Col du Glandon, and we're just about to enter, or the riders are just about to enter the steepest part of it. This midsection here, where it goes into the red, you see. This is the steepest part, and this is where somebody brave might decide to make an attack for the mountain points, or equally somebody might find it a bit too tough and drop off the back. This is a crucial part of this climb of the Col du Glandon.
Well, back to Sir Hubert Opperman. He was known as Oppie, by the way, and if you had a bag over your shoulder called Oppie bag, because he was the first one to have what we now call the musette, and brought that back into Britain. I think he rode with the BSA bikes in those days when he broke the Lands End John O'Groats record. But he became a very important man in the Australian government and became Sir Hubert Opperman. Never lost his love for cycling, always rode his bike, and very, very nice man indeed. And he was still riding his bike into the 90s, and his wife said to him one day that she was scared of him going out on his bike and back in Australia, and so she bought an exercise bike to stop him going out and riding his bike, because she thought the roads were getting too dangerous. And there he was, wearing away on his exercise bike, and he died. And I think he must have died with a smile on his face. He's a great man, a great character, and a big figurehead for Australian cycling.
Yeah, he was, David. I had the pleasure of meeting him once a few years ago. Do you remember the Harrogate International Cycling Show? I had the pleasure of meeting Sir Hubert there some years back. Now then, look at this. Is Lance Armstrong stronger than last year? And a massive 61% of you out there, viewers, are saying no, he is not. Only 17% of you out there are saying yes, he is. 22% say about the same. But that is amazing, isn't it? A very, very clear majority for the no's. I wonder whether that's because he didn't attempt to get back up to the winner of yesterday's stage, Iban Mayo, on the climb of the Alpe d'Huez. Although, David, I don't know what you and Sean feel, but I think that he rode a very calculated finish there, because he was well aware that little lead group was lying third on the road, if you like, behind Mayo and Vinokurov, and he had the foresight to sprint across the line to take third place and get those 8 extra bonus seconds, which, who knows, might be vital in the end. After all, Greg LeMond once won the Tour, Fignon once lost the Tour by just 8 seconds.
Yeah, we shall see as we bring you all the live pictures of the Tour de France going right the way through to the finish of the race on the 27th of July in Paris. We shall wait and see if it is that a few seconds made the difference, but we do have time trials yet to come where Lance Armstrong may be able to stamp his authority on the race. To some extent he knows that, we knew that Mayo down the road is no great time trials, because his team, Mayo's team Escudero, lost a lot of time in the team time trial, hence the reason that Mayo, who won the stage yesterday, didn't get the yellow jersey. A lot of people don't quite understand how it all comes about. They say, well, the man who won the stage, why hasn't he got the yellow jersey? The whole thing is that as we started out on Saturday week in Paris with that time trial, the riders then were counted across the line, and every day every rider is counted, his time is taken, and there are of course bonuses of 20, 12 and 8 at the end of the stages, and in between 6, 4 and 2 seconds at the 2 sprints that we have, so they deduct that. But the whole thing is about counting up the time it takes for each individual rider to go from the start in Paris to the finish in Paris, and it's the winner who gets at the end with the shortest possible time. Simple as that. So even though Mayo won the stage yesterday, he'd already lost something like over 3 minutes on Lance Armstrong in the team time trial. So that's why he didn't take the yellow jersey. That's why Lance Armstrong did do just that, because Lance's team did a great ride in the team time trial, and that's why he's now in yellow. You can see by the water coming down here off the mountains over those different weirs on the way down bouncing its way down, that we're on our way up. The water's on its way down, and the shore side is rise. Look left or right, they're certainly not in a false flat. Beautiful little picture here of the village and the people turning out in great numbers. It is a holiday, July the 14th in France, so the people on the side of the road here, not all of them have just come to watch the Tour de France. They're here, you can see, camping on the sides of the road, because this is the time with the French population have virtually the whole of the month of July, or part July, part August of. It has been decreed a national holiday many years ago, I think as a result of the revolution, and then they decreed that the workers should have time off, because before the revolution the employers and the landowners kept the workers nose down to grind. So I hate cliches, but that was just about it. You got very little pleasure time, and then once the revolution was underway, then they came up some years later with this great idea that the whole of France should have a holiday, and it's in this period we're on now, and that means that the people come out on holiday anywhere. All these camper vans here, they're not just come for the Tour de France, they're out here, some on normal holidays in this beautiful part of the world. Many of the vans we do see leapfrogging from stage to stage, travelling overnight, setting up camp yet again, particularly on the climbs you've got here. But add to that the holiday makers, and I feel very sorry. Today we found in Gap, when we went to get some petrol, diesel for the car, that there were some British holiday makers. They got like vans behind them. They were towing these little special canoes for downhill canoeing, or down water canoeing, the whitewater canoes, and they were heading in towards Gap. There were about 2 of these vehicles, obviously they're all going on holiday to do what you've just seen there, go down those torrents, and they were just going into Gap to discover that the whole of the centre of the town has been completely blocked, and they had to go around enormous sort of derivations, almost bypasses, to get away from the whole thing. And of course, if they're not aware of the Tour de France, many British holiday makers go out on holiday and suddenly discover that they can't move for 3 hours. They're stuck while the Tour de France goes by. And so any of your Brits setting off on holiday in this next couple of weeks, I suggest you check to try and find the route to Tour de France, because we're going right the way down across to Marseille tomorrow. A day off, then we're going across from Narbonne, across the Pyrenees, and then up from Bordeaux, heading up along the west coast of France, all up to Nantes and back into Paris. So if you're planning your routes for your holiday in that direction, I suggest that you try and check the route of the race, and maybe I think like the AA and RAC and other people on their computers will give you some advice about the blockage that might be on your way through. But that's what the Tour de France does. It brings the area they're going through completely to a halt. Nobody went up the Alpe d'Huez in any motor vehicle except those with the official stickers on after 9 o'clock yesterday. It was completely stopped off. As we go back to Mike Smith, who is not travelling anywhere at the moment. He goes to and from the hotel into the dungeons, and he's now got some information for you.
Yeah, well, we're back with Philippe Gaumont, the Cofidis rider, and remember earlier on down in the valley he was operating at 80% of capacity. Well, as you can see now on the lower slopes, well, he's about halfway. The leader's obviously further up. He's 85% of capacity now, so he can't go much further before he blows a gasket, David. Just before I go back to you, you mentioned my hotel. I have to tell you and the viewers, for what it's worth, that I didn't start the day off today in the best of moods. Around about 6 o'clock this morning, there were those horrendous noises outside the hotel, and I had no option but to get up and have a look out of the window to see what this awful noise was. And it was the French army in their tanks coming past my hotel at 6 o'clock this morning. They were on the way to the Champs-Élysées, which today, just like on the last day of the Tour de France, is closed down completely for the grand procession of Bastille Day. I have seen it once. I had to come to the studios too early today, so I wasn't able to go and see it, but I have seen this procession in the past on the Champs-Élysées, David. Maybe you have too. It's an enormous operation, and it's a tremendous celebration by the French, as you say, of the commemoration of the storming of the Bastille, which happened on July the 14th, 1789. But I was not best pleased when the tanks hurtled past my hotel at a great rate of knots, making the most enormous noise at 6 o'clock this morning.
You'd even be less pleased if they'd stop and turn the guns on you, Mike. Oh dear. Yes, you obviously viewers back in Britain will probably pick some up on their terrestrial news stations. It is a great occasion, big fly past and a wonderful, great ceremony, and well worth, if you are in the future planning to visit France, to go to Paris for the July the 14th. The celebrations go on all night, by the way. Many years ago, when the cycling magazine, that's the weekly magazine, they used to run trips over to France, and we would get a coach. And my job then in the publicity department, not in the fact I was a cyclist, but just I was in the publicity department of the whole group. There was 15 magazines in Temple Press in those days. We had trade and technical papers, things to do with nuclear engineering, chemical this and yachting and God knows otherwise. We would take readers of various magazines. Like we would take loads of, you mentioned Mike, the Isle of Man, Mike. We used to take loads of motorcyclists over there on trips on the boat across there, and it just happened, coincidentally, sort of actually finishing in Paris over the weekend of the 14th of July. They must have shifted the date a bit now, and we had the good fortune for the readers of Cycling magazine in the coach that day after the finish of the Tour de France to go to Tom Simpson's hotel, and he came out onto the coach and greeted everybody and signed autographs. It was a wonderful occasion, and that night on the 14th of July we had no sleep at all. I don't think any of the people on the coach went to sleep at all. Some blurry eyes going back on the coach the next day. Right, back with the race now. Sean Kelly has been sitting here making all the notes. We better get back to reality and what's happening now, not in the past, Sean. And perhaps for those viewers who say, what the hell's going on, Sean Kelly will put you in the picture. Sean.
Well, we 7 riders in the front, 420 up on the main bunch, and the 7 are Jack Simons, De Luca from Seco, Para from Kelme, Casero, Angamendia from Bianchi, Lopez de Munhain from Escatel, and Pelazzotti from Alezio. And the rest of the bunch are in between, the rest that breakaway, are in between. McGee, he's also after getting left behind. Zampieri, of course, we see Perone somewhere in between also. We see Lastras getting caught by the bunch, so these riders have dropped a lot more on their own, so they're going to be just swallowed up by the bunch, but the 7 leaders are working very well, and as I said, over the 4 minutes of an advantage.
Doesn't see anybody in that group is of any great significance in competition with Armstrong for the yellow jersey. On this stage, this is the biggest climb we've got today, Sean, the Col du Glandon. Is it just going to be sort of we're just going to have a little conversation with our friends in Paris. Back in a minute. We're on the Col du Glandon. This is the remnants, 2, 4, 6, 7 of them. The leading groups have been changing all the way, Sean, since we started out this morning. Got like a great rate of knots up the Col de l'Autre. Is any of this little group we see here left over from that early sortie up the Col de l'Autre, or we keep sort of seeing changes of the hopefuls?
Well, there is, there was groups going and coming, and Pezzolotti, and there was a number of those guys up in the breaks, and there was, there was groups coming and getting caught. So I think the interesting thing is the attacks, the way they were in the race. The US Postals, they were in a bit scattered for a while. We heard that Payne was getting dropped also, Ekimov was getting dropped, but we see now they are back in the bunch here and they're starting to set the pace. But with the with the way it was going in the beginning, it was really going fast, and an awful lot of riders lost contact that never came back. A lot of the sprinters, I don't think they've made contact with the bunch, so it's going to be a long day for those guys. The interesting thing also is we see a teammate of Richard Rank riding on the front here, Kurt van der Wouter, and we just see a shot of a Rank there. So for he's trying to keep this breakaway to the limit really, and I suppose he's still interested and hopeful that he can take some more of the climbs in the end of the race, maybe, because they're not going to get back before the top of his bar. But they have two climbs in the end, a second category and a third category, so he will be hoping maybe to pick up some points on those.
And Mike Smith has the details of that breakaway that's just been identified for you by Sean Kelly. Mike.
Yes, David, well, here's what you used to call your piece of cheese, but as you say, it has changed a little now because we get bits of yellow and bits of red. And there, as you can see, they went away at kilometre 24, which of course was on the first climb, the Loteré. But having reached around about a couple of minutes or so, the lead then came down quite a bit on the descent. But look how it's gone up again, as we're now about 3/4 of the way up the Izoard, back up to 4 minutes 20. So we're in the yellow again and still climbing up, possibly even more.
And Sean, what's that mean to at the moment? It doesn't have any threat, does it? You can see that little breakaway at the moment going towards top there for Veronk, does it? Because he's still got that jersey going into the stage today for the Kingdom Andes competition. I'd have thought he would like to go up there and go at the top of that lead group, but he seems to have sort of sagged off a bit, as that little graphic there which Mike gave us, I think it's rather interesting. But going on the Kingdom Andes competition, Veronk's got 134 points, Lance Armstrong 63, Manchego 61, so he's got a hatful of points. So is he going to leave this little lot go down here? Because the point's going to 15 spots, or is he just going to try and launch himself on a suicidal mission towards the back end of the race? Because he can't surely allow the 4th of July go by without one of his remarkably stupid attacks. I shouldn't say stupid, they come off from time to time, but he's had a little bit of go earlier on, but he's now just sat back there and waiting. Are we like to see more of him, do you think?
Yes, well, the interesting thing is when you say stupid attacks, you're not the only one said that, because there was a discussion the other day with the French commentators and with Nix, a rider, a Tour de France winner, I won't mention his name, and he said on air
that he's not sitting long from us, is he?
He said it was a stupid attack, and they had a discussion afterwards between the other commentators, and sometimes the stupid attacks work out. And I remember with Director Sportives, we had some riders in the team which were not really good for tactic. They do these crazy attacks, and I remember the director said to me, sometimes it's better to have a rider who is stupid, because he will attack and he will do something, because the ones are too clever, they will sit in the bunch and they always have an excuse and they never do nothing. So that's the thing I always remember. But I think Veronk, he's hoping maybe to pull back this break before the end, and the two final climbs, which I said were a second category and a third category, with 28 k's to go, and with 8 k's to go, he'd be hoping maybe to build some points there and take a few more, just to have at that comfort zone, because with his Armstrong up there in the classement in the days to come in the mountains, he could knock up some points, and maybe he could just take his jersey, not go setting out to do it, but it could happen. So he's probably trying to cover himself in that way.
But how much leeway running in towards the finish will the US Postals give him? Because he's 4 minutes 48 seconds down on Lance Armstrong, and presumably that's why he's sensible enough now, not being stupid, not to try and attack him too soon, because at 4 minutes 48 with his climbing ability, presumably he could chip away at Lance Armstrong's lead. So I think, are you interpreting here that his best chance of doing something is to wait till the end, when he won't get more than a minute and a half if he does break away? Sean, how would you rate that? 4:48 in 18th spot.
Well, I don't think he will actually try and break away. I think if they start riding after the climb, when they get down on the level in the valley, if the budge keeps on going, this group could be caught in the end and be caught before the final, the second last climb, which is at the 28k to go. He could knock up some points there, and that would be his tactic. I think. I don't think he'd be trying to go on the attack in the end, because this is not it's not difficult enough to for him to create a difference and to attack in the final. So I think he's missed the group, but he did try in the end. We see in that very big group in the beginning, he was trying to get away in it, but he didn't get the opportunity to get away. I think the group was too big, unfortunately, for him, and the US Postals closed it down very quickly.
Well, Mercado's decided he's 31st on general classification, 8 minutes 48 seconds down, to try and cross that gap to join up with the riders at the front. He missed the bus, actually, or the more than that, the train at the front, and now he's trying to go across to join them. Nobody seems to be too bothered to try and go for him, and he'll add to the numbers of the riders. And just to recap then, who is in that leading group that we saw our top shot from just a moment ago?
Well, I think the interesting thing for the Banesto is they had Lastras up there, but he didn't last, and he came back and he's been caught by the bunch. So this rider has got to try and go in the attack now, and on the 7 leaders, which we have, is Yax from Onsale, De Luca from Sieco, Para from Kelme, Casero and Garmendia from Bianchi, Lopez de Munheim from Escatel, and Pelzalotti from Alezio. And the last time check was over 4 minutes.
Casero, there's a man who's won the Tour of Italy in the past and had a pretty dismal tour so far. He has the skill and experience to try and do something. It's interesting to see him up there, because other top riders that, whoops, something's happened on the far side, the motorbike's gone down. We may see that. I think he dropped it into the gutter.
Spectator.
Well, Spectator, was it?
I think there was a Spectator in front of him, and he's actually tried to go behind the Spectator, as far as I was looking at my notes here, but that looked like what happened.
Let's see if we're going to pick that up again. I just looked up at the screen. We've got two screens. One I look at cross Sean, he looks the other way. In between us we've got a computer picking up the details. We've got two normal phones, two mobile phones, lots of buttons to press and coming out of. And so we're not making excuses, just explaining. We're trying to watch this, do that, do something else. And if we miss a little trick, then please back there at home say, oh, no, look, you should have seen this. And the answer is, when you're sitting there in your home with your feet up and the telly going full blast, we do the best we can, and do bear with us if we get it wrong, but somehow something happened there, and for some reason I don't think we normally get a replay of it. The cameraman hasn't, or the director back there hasn't made any desire to give us information what it wanted. I'm not quite sure anything to do with the riders. I think it's to do with the motorcyclist and a spectator. Anyway, they're picking themselves out of the gutter right now as we're back with the tail end here. There's the yellow Mavic car going through. They've been servicing this race, I think it's sort of like 20 odd years now, and they've got a car up in the front cavalcade which is decorated in the old days with the old Mavic logo on it, and some old bikes from about the 1930s on the top too as well. So that's all part of the jamboree going on with this, the 100th anniversary Tour de France. O'Grady's spending his time at the back here. He's the guard at the moment. He's taking the tickets, I think. He's still there, and one by one they've been dropping off and going past him, and he's still there hanging on. Super ride by Stewie from Australia, hanging on there just at the back here, and one by one they come drifting back. He doesn't get much help from them. He just hangs on for grim death. Eventually, from time to time, he gets back in the remnants, and they go a bit quickly. He goes back out again. But the gutsy Australian, winner of course of the Commonwealth Games in Manchester area back at the back end of last year. So he's the Commonwealth Games champion, a past medal winner in the team pursuit. He's got the World Championship rings around him because of his pursuing in those days gone by, and he's the national champion. And here another champion from Germany is Zabel himself, 6 times winner of the green jersey. He's got determination to hang on to this group. He and Stuart O'Grady typify the sprinters who go for that green jersey. And you may remember that O'Grady had that green jersey, what was it, a couple of years ago, right until the final day on the Champs-Élysées, when he was out sprinted by Eric Zabel, and he lost the green jersey on the final day. So those riders at the back, you have to have sympathy for them. They soldier on right the way through to the finish, and Sean Kelly's been through that too as well, 4 times winner of the green jersey, soldiered on all the way to Paris, and then finally Franco Hosta, I think it was, beat him to the line. In fact, I saw Franco Hosta the other day, and I saw him talking to you, and you still speak to him, Sean?
Yes, we do, and you know, we always spoke. At the end of that tour, of course, it was disappointing, and you know, to be beaten on the Champs-Élysées with the green jersey on your shoulders, but that's bike racing. And in the time trial the previous day, it was in the Bonjolet region, I was also trying to defend a place on the general, so I had to give it 100%, where host didn't have to do that. So I think I paid a little bit for that, but you know, that's a normal thing in bike racing. You talk together before the race, you go out and you battle with your enemies, I suppose you could call them, in the race, but after the race it's over and you're the best of friends again. Sometimes, you know, you get into a bit of discussion when you're in a bunch that you're fighting for positions, and you do have maybe some heated words, but normally after the race, you know, you forget it all, and you just, you know, you talk between each other.
Well, certainly I've seen you chatting to him as this massive crowd. They're not mountaineers, they're spectators, by the way, getting a bird's eye view. Watch out for the vultures and the wolves, folks. Anyway, back then to Mike Smith and something about the profile so far. Mike.
Yeah, well, we're not too far off the summit. You might have just seen, David, the 3K to go sign just a couple of minutes before. There you see they're back almost into the yellow, as it were, from the red. They've gone through that steep part at around just after the half distance, and that gives you an idea. Roughly 3 kilometres, just inside 3 kilometres to go to the top of this hors categorie climb, the Col de l'Isoire.
And over the top of that one, they'll be sweeping down into the valley. In fact, all the way down to the lunch stop. Now, they won't stop. They go whizzing their way through. And we're picking up the action here. Sean's watching it very carefully. Well, I just checked for you the fact that off the top of this, with the 86 kilometres covered, and by the time they get down to where the feed station is, 122 kilometres will have been covered in the race today. So we're talking around about just less than 40 kilometres, maybe 35 kilometres off the top of here. Most of it's downhill for them to get their feed zone, which is at the Carrefour VC / N94, whatever that might be. Zooming down the other side, and they will be over the top. I think on the way down, unless they fall off, it won't change much, and maybe the chaps at the back have managed to get back on. We were talking before we picked up that little graphic about the riders going for that green jersey. Already off the back, Baden Cook is struggling to hang on in there for this competition. There's no way in which the sprinter specialists can get any points today, but Baden Cook has 120 points. Robin McEwen, who went off a long time ago, 110 points, 10 points for him, and Hushov at 104. Robin McEwen must have to be careful today, because presumably they'll have the same sort of cut-off point for riders outside the limit. He's not that far back, but if he can get over the top of this and regroup, so he must be pretty close to him. It looks like he's lost that zip, which I've seen him before, and you have too, Sean, when he got the green points, got the finish in the Champs-Élysées and the green points jersey. How do you rate him this year?
Yes, I don't think he's riding as well as he was last year. He was climbing better, and in the sprints, of course, he's not been having a good week. The first week hasn't been good at all. When you say you don't see any of the sprinters or the green jersey contenders getting points today, we have to be careful with Zabel, because if he gets, he's still in the bunch there, he's hanging on, and they're coming up to the last 3 kilometres to the summit. So if he can limit his losses, come back, even if he do get dropped a little bit, come back on the descent, and I think in the end he could get all these climbs, because the second category and third category. So who knows what could happen in the final. It could come together, and maybe we'll see a sprint of quite a big group here in Gap. So Azabel could be a man who could pick up points if they all come together for the final sprint.
You've done it, Sean. Look at these zigzags, the climbing coming up there. What's going through his head, Ron? Does he know that what you just... He must have.
Yes, that's exactly what he's thinking, and that is the plan set out this morning. Limit the time, hang on as long as possible, and if he's close on the climb of the Isoire, then he has a chance to come back on the descent if he's not with them, if he's not too far off, and then in the final, the second category and the third category, he can get up those, and if it happens to come together, well, then he has a very good chance of winning a stage and also taking a lot of points from the likes of McEwen and from the likes of the other O'Grady and the other green jersey riders.
Well, O'Grady was struggling there, not far off him. He had 91 points this morning, but certainly Baden, Cook and McEwen are hanging on. But let's try and find out where Tor Hushford is, the Norwegian, because he had 104 points this morning. It almost looks like a little model, doesn't it? If you've got model railways and you whiz them round and you put little trees there, and you have this sort of sinuous shape there which you put a railway track. That was looking down at it. It was a lovely sight of these fir trees there. It always was like a model, but as far as these riders go, it's reality there. Pelazzotti, he with the flowing locks in that little breakaway group, and let's get an update on that. We only have 1.7 kilometres to go.
Yes, well, the 7 leaders are Yaks, as we see from the Onse. He was on the front there. He's doing a lot of the work. He's pulling this break along quite a lot of the time. And we also have De Luca from Seco, Para from Kelme, Casero and Garmendia from Bianchi, Lopez de Munhain from Escatel, and Pelzalotti from Alezio.
Well, Pelazzotti is one of the new kids on the block, and certainly he's been tipped as being one of the big riders in the future. He's getting experience from this one. Probably the most experienced rider in there then, Jaska from the Onse team. He's lying 10th overall on this classification. With a name like that, yes, he comes to Germany. Here's the German champion, still, as Sean was saying, just keen to stay with it. And looks like he's got O'Grady in front. There's a fine pair of chasers, eh?
Yes, well, we all know if they can, get to the top, and they will be quite close to the bunch when they get the top now, because they're getting close to that. So on the descent, they can do that very well, and they could pull back a minute and a half on the bunch very, very easily. And it's quite a long descent, so the possibilities of getting back are great for them. So they are going to really work hard on it and just limit the seconds lost before they get to the summit.
But O'Grady, Zabel riding their own pace. We saw O'Grady a bit down, going straight past Baden Cook, didn't even say good day mate as he went through. Is this just sole concentration, and you're not going to look on a wheel and take a gap, you're just going to keep riding, because these two are quite interesting, aren't they?
Yes, you have to just keep on riding, keep concentrated, and as we see here, O'Grady is doing that, and sometimes when you're on the limit, on the rear of the bunch, and it accelerates a bit, you just leave it go, and then you try and come back later.
A number of riders we've just been hearing have got back from the early break, and it's actually starting to happen now, because the leading group had regrouped. One or two of these riders splattered between the leaders and the breakaway group had suddenly slowed. Out came the chaps they shelled out, and at that very moment, with 1 kilometre to go, Arto Garmendia goes off the front here, riding for the same team as Ulrich, who's coming into stage today, past winner of this race, and 3 times into a second spot. Ulrich this morning was 2 minutes and 10 seconds down on Armstrong. He's in the pack with Armstrong, but his teammate down the road in those very familiar Bianchi colours is about to go over the top of a climb here, which has been in the days of Fausto Coppi, who rode Bianchi bicycles, a place that he too had been over many times in the first spot. Coppi went over the top in 1950 in first spot. He went over the top in 1949. Then in 1951, Coppi was the first man to go over the top of this climb on that particular occasion, and the Bianchi colours being exhibited here. Mind you, Coppi didn't always ride for the Bianchi team in terms of colours on his jersey. He often rode in the days when there were national teams. There was French teams from France and Belgium and Italy. Now they don't have national teams, we have commercial teams. But Fausto Coppi was always riding on a nice celeste blue bicycle. The colour here being worn by man Garmendia, trying to get over the top of this very famous climb at Izard, 2,361 metres above sea level, and when they get over the top they'll have 86 kilometres to go down into the finish. It looks like Jasker, I think, behind him here, trying to stay the pace. Another super climber indeed. From the Onse team, the German rider at the front, and we've seen, looking back down there, another German rider, the champion of Germany, just hanging on at the back, desperately trying to stay in contention for maybe a sprint finish, Eric Zabel. And this is the typical sign of the riders going up over the mountains as they go. But just imagine those days in 1922, and the first time we went over the Izard, when Thijs went over the top of the climb, and those roads are virtually unmade roads, just no better than cart tracks. And over there they went on these single speed bicycles. They get to the top, and then they take the wheel out, turn it round and put it back in again with a bigger gear for the descent. So that's the only gears they had by taking the wheels out. And at the top there'll be judges recording their numbers they went through. They were in black jerseys and black shorts in those days, and those black shorts and black jerseys will be covered with dust from the dusty roads, and if it poured with rain they'd be covered in mud too as well. This is the colourful side of this, the 2003 Tour of France, and looks like the familiar colours, a familiar Bianchi going up there, Garmendia, to take this famous climb over the top of the Izard. And behind, look at Jasker's going for it, and the rider from the Kelme team.
Para. So second Jaska and Para in third position.
And that's it. And they're beautiful day for it. Gosh, we've been over here, they've been over in the years gone by when the conditions have been pretty awful indeed. In fact, funny enough, some years ago, when the Tour de France was down in Val d'Isère, which is just down the other side from here in Val d'Isère, those of you who've been watching Eurosport regularly, all three of you may remember that we had a time trial into Val d'Isère, and as they're rocketing down here, the race was going to start in Val d'Isère and go over the top of the Isère in the next morning. And as they're going down here, just bear a thought for the fact that on that particular occasion it snowed on the top, and I hadn't even thought about it when the then managing director of Eurosport came along. He said, David, where are you staying tonight? I said, here in down at the bottom of the mountain. We're going up is it on tomorrow? I said, here we are in Val d'Isère. We finished the time trial. He said, David, he said, there's going to be snow tonight. I suggest you go on. And we were going the next day to Sestriere. So I phoned Sestriere and said to the hotel secretary, can I come over tonight? He said, yep, okay, off you go. So I set off and left there. And went over the top of this climb here, and as I went over the top of the climb in the reverse direction of what you're seeing here, there was a great big snow plough, an enormous thing, and in the front of up in the cabin there were two Frenchmen with the typical berets and the blue overalls smoking their, I suppose, Galois. You can see this sight, can't you? I thought, they know something that the general public don't know, because all the way up here, it's because it's coming up, not going down, there were the camper vans and there were people setting out with their tents for the night and their cars which they're going to sleep out in. And that night the temperature dropped and down came the snow, and this lot here was covered in snow, and the race to come up it, they actually put them into team car, they put them into buses, and they came up with a snowplow clearing the way over the top and down the other side of the Isère and Col d'Isère, and we went on and had a very short stage which went straight into Sestriere, and that was the day that Bjorn Ries just romped away from the gun into Sestriere and took over the yellow jersey on a shortened stage, and that was it. It changed it all completely. But you imagine the spectators up here, they come up there, they camped out, it snowed, and they just couldn't see it, and they were booing and shouting when the riders came by in the buses with the snowplow in front. There's no way they could have ridden up here. It was just full of slush and everything else. So then the camper van people decided they'd try and get down here and cut across to Sestriere at the finish. And they were slipping and sliding, and all hell was let loose. So the most amazing day it was in the Tour de France. So you can imagine then the spectators today enjoying the sunshine have got much difficult conditions. In fact, this has probably been one of the most warm Tour de France we've had for many years. It's been sunny all the way through. I don't think we've had a drop of rain so far. Certainly we haven't had any snow, which can cause havoc, as those of you will remember when we covered the Tour of Italy early on this year, when it also snowed on that occasion. So Sean, you've been over these climbs in the past. This is a gorgeous day for bike racing, isn't it?
Yes, it certainly is. Maybe a little bit too warm for the riders, because it is the last number of days it's been very warm, and today again. So I think the riders will suffer if a little bit cooler conditions. The temperature's not as high, would be better, but some riders do improve in that sort of weather. So but it's definitely better than the weather you were talking about, David, when you get the rain, the snow, because on those climbs it's so dangerous. First of all, the descent when it's wet, and the riders getting cold, very warm going up because you're climbing, and then when you start going down. So I think on a whole the riders would prefer this weather than the bad wet conditions.
5:15 at the moment. That's quite a bit of a gap though, Sean. There seems to be no activity to do anything about that breakaway group, because Para from the Kelme team, he was 9 minutes 18 seconds down today. That may not be any great concern to the rest of this little lot, but I seem to think that Jaska in there, in fact he's 3 minutes 19 seconds down on the general classification. Why aren't they doing something about it?
Well, I think it's early days yet. We have from the top we had the 98 Ks to the finish. So I think the US posters are saying, well, there's a lot of teams who will start the action after this climb and on the flat before we get into the final, where the two climbs in the last 30 kilometres. So I don't think they're worried, but I think it's early days yet. It's just the distance is there to go. As we see Virenque up in the front here, he's looking around, he's looking for the points. Manchebo is also going for it, but there's a number of points available. I think there's 3 places with points up for grabs here. We see Virenque taking it from Manchebo.
But the gap coming up on your screen and going on top of that climb, which is what they call Oak 8C, Oak category climb. The points going back were 40, 35, 30 and so on, back to the 15th rider over the line. So if he's having a little go in there still, there was to the back end 6, 4, 2 and 21 points, so he's still after every point he can get. But the man who got the maximum points, 40 points in all, Garmendia, are dropping down the other side like a stone, and he does come down. My goodness, he comes down all the way on, really a little bit of a blip as we go through a place called Guilista, but that's only a sort of false flat before we drop down to the feed zone, and that will be after 122 kilometres have been covered. At the moment they've covered 86 kilometres in the race. As you join us, the riders dropping off the top of the climb, and Sean has the information about the gap back to the peloton, and we saw going over the top of that climb Garmendia, Yashka and Para. What's behind at the moment and what's important there, because it seems quite a bit of gap back to the US Postals, Sean.
Yes, well, Varank, I think, is an interesting thing. He was going for the place there, and they gave him the 15th place, but
1 point.
But,
point.
Yes.
That's more than Britain got in the blasted Eurovision Song Contest. We got 0 point, I think, that time.
But the interesting thing is, I think there's a lot of riders in between these leaders. We have to see the 7 leaders. You know, there's Mercado, Fletcher, Moncotti, Zampieri. There are 220, 255, Perron and Sherroa. McGee is in there at around the 3 minutes, and then we see Varank with the rider from Mercado, was it?
Yep, Mercado, yep, from Benesto. And it looks like, going back to the pictures here on the screen, that O'Grady's managed to get himself back into something of a bit of a chase group at the moment. Haven't quite seen what's happened to Zabel, but as I said, once over the top and down the other side, some of these specialist climbers are pretty mad when it comes down to dropping off the mountain climb. This is an extremely long descent, and Mike Smith in Paris, why don't we have a downhill thing to frighten people as well, eh?
Yes.
How's your graphics going?
Well, in fact, we have shown 1 or 2 graphics of the downhills since we started the tour. It seems like ages ago now, David, so I don't know whether they've got one lined up for me for this descent, because as you rightly say, it is quite a long descent all the way virtually down to the feed zone, the Ravitaillement, which comes at 122 kilometres. So some death-defying stunts by some of these riders are now in store for all our viewers. It should make interesting viewing. I always like to see them whizzing down. The only difference is, though, David, and I'm sure people have spotted this, you get lots and lots and lots of people spectating on the climbs, but you got very few on the descent, because of course they're suddenly whizzing past at something speeds sometimes in excess of 60 miles an hour, so there's not a lot of point in spectating on a descent, is there, because you only see them going and then they're gone. Anyway, here's the important thing, and I was quite curious to see Richard Virenque there sprinting over the top of the Izoard. I knew that 14 riders had gone over ahead of him, and I thought, nah, he won't bother for just 1 silly little point, will he? But yes, he did, and that tells us a lot, doesn't it, David? Every point to Richard Virenque is important. He even put the effort in to get that 1 point for 15th place. There you see the situation. Lance Armstrong in the points himself, now up into 2nd place. Garmendia's come from nowhere because he got the maximum points, of course. He's up into 3rd place. So the situation has changed below Virenque, but you've got to say that the Frenchman has to be in a very strong position to get that jersey all the way to Paris.
And Garmendia, though, going through here, quite right, Mike, he's going to for the scraps from his master's table, I think, at the moment, because the next climb will be a 2nd category climb. And when he goes to a 2nd category climb, there will be points down to 10th place, 20, 15, 12. So Garmendia, if he can hang on out there to the next climb, which will be after 156 kilometres race, it's got a long way to go yet, could probably leapfrog Armstrong into 2nd spot. But it may be just tactics as far as the Bianchi team are concerned to send him down there so that they have to chase it. But Garmendia is so far down General Cascade, and I don't think the US Post is going to be too bothered. He's 39 minutes and 21 seconds down. So I think you've seen the general situation over the top, and as they come down here, we'll keep an eye on the pictures of them dropping down off the top. We wish them the best of luck, and it's probably the only opportunity before we go back up the next mountain, Mike, for you to dig down into your great big box of or file of emails. If you'd like to dig something out, give me a shout as soon as you've got something in your hot little hand, and we'll pick them up as we just now going to be a bit quiet for a change. Commentators normally speak far too much. We'll just let you watch them come down the mountain until Mike Smith has dug amongst his lots of bits of paper. Just to give us 2 or 3 minutes to watch this. Well, I thought they did give us a top shot. Normally they do with it coming down. A sinuous descent again. Look at this, they come down here. They're travelling at 35, 40 miles an hour. You may notice that the tarmac in certain parts going into bends has been relayed to make sure the rise came down here smoothly, no bouncing over the potholes. And the US Post are on the front, so you watch it. And Mike Smith, have you shuffled the pack, Mike?
Oh yes, I've got loads of them here, David. How long have you got?
How long it takes to drop down the mountain?
Yeah, well, I tell you what,
watch. We might. Go on, off you go.
We'll keep our eyes open on the screen, obviously, but I started to go into the story from Neil Penfold of Fareham the other day regarding Phil Anderson. I was hoping that Christy would be there to hear it, but she'd gone off to talk to Pitaki, and Sean said, well, she probably won't come back. And I know she's not there just yet, but I'm going to tell this story anyway. It won't take too long. Nice little story about Phil Anderson. In 1994, says Neil Penfold, when the tour came to Portsmouth, I was 19 and a massive cycling fan like I am now. Went to the hotel in Portsmouth where most of the teams were staying to catch a glimpse of the riders. One of the organisers saw me and asked me who I was looking for. I said Motorola, which of course was the forerunner to US Postal. He then took me into the hotel, into the restaurant, where he introduced me to Phil Anderson, my hero. Phil was in the middle of his meal after a hard day in the saddle, yet he stood up to meet me, shook my hand, gave me the warmest smile, chatted to me, introduced me to the whole team, including Sean Yates and Max Chiandri. They were with Motorola then. I was absolutely amazed and ecstatic. I still have the autographs now, and listen to this, here's the denouement, David. Although I didn't think to ask for the autograph of a certain young, unknown 22-year-old sitting at the same table, whose name I discovered later on was Lance Armstrong. What a nice little story from Neil Penfold.
Nice
Thanks,
bit of history
Neil.
there.
Yeah, nice little story from Neil. We've had one or two asking about Oscar Sevilla, why he isn't in the Akelma team. John Christmas was one guy. Well, John and the rest of you, sadly, Oscar was taken ill just a week or so before the tour. He was hoping to be riding it. I would have liked to have seen him. I like the choir boy. He's a good little climber. And sadly, he's not in the Akelma team because of illness. So thanks for all of you asking about Oscar. Several people also, David, have asked, is there any rule prohibiting women from participating in the tour? Or the other question I've seen from one or two is there a women's tour? Well, yes, there is. And they have their own Tour de France Féminin. In fact, David, we've covered it a few times here on Eurosport over the years, have we not? And one for you to take Go on.
Go on.
All right.
No, I think we've hardly ever covered it, mate. You may be knowing something I didn't know. It's maybe only snippets that they show.
Well, a couple of years ago, I did the whole thing.
Yeah.
We covered it in 3 recorded highlights programmes.
That's right. We only do the highlights. We don't do it like we're doing here, do we?
That's correct. That's absolutely correct. I'll give you one more to chew over, David. Going back to Seiko and the outfits they were wearing a couple of days ago with that logo on the side of the shorts, legalise my Cannondale. Quite a few people picked up on that. In particular, somebody or some group called Team Ireland, referring to the UCI rule that states a bike's got to have a minimum weight of 6.8 kilometres, which equates to almost exactly 15 pounds. And a lot of people say this is ridiculous. They say that the move to introduce the new jerseys was publicity to get their new superlight bike legalised. So keep up the good work, Cannondale, they say. You really have to keep technology moving in the bicycle world. I believe that as long as the bikes meet safety requirements, it should be allowed to be built for UCI races up to the Tour de France. There's an interesting one from Team Ireland, David. You can chew that one over when you get the opportunity.
We've got commercial breaks coming up at the moment. There's a bloke zooming past the finishing line here on a recumbent bike with wheels about 16-20 inches in size, and it's Vincent Barteau himself, and all my commentary colleagues from France are erupting. So talking about bicycles, the UCI might, we're going for an ad break, and he has excited the people here by going across the field. He's an absolute nutcase. He's, by the way, was the man who went into Marseille to win the stage there. I think he went on to take the yellow jersey too as well, or he's wearing the yellow jersey. He's an amazing character. He's entertaining us on a bicycle which would never, ever, ever meet the regulations of the UCI. We'll come back after the break here as you watch them going down the descent to Izard. with some comment for the readers of Cycling Magazine in the coach that day after the finish of the Tour de France to go to Thompson.
There's 3 places with points up for grabs here. We see Varang taking it from Manchego.
But the gap coming up on your screen and going on top of that climb, which is what they call Oak 8C Oak category climb. The points going back were 40, 35, 30 and so on, back to the 15th rider over the line. So if he's having a little go in there still, there was what to the back end 6, 4, 2 and 1 point. So he's still after every point he can get. But the man who got the maximum points, 40 points in all, Garmendia, are dropping down the other side like a stone, and he does come down. My goodness, he comes down all the way on. Really a little bit of a blip as we go through a place called Guilista, but that's only a sort of false flat before we drop down to the feed zone, and that will be after 122 kilometres have been covered. At the moment they've covered 86 kilometres in the race. And we saw going over the top of that climb Garmendia, Yashka and Para. What's behind at the moment and what's important there? Because it seems quite a bit of gap back to the US Postals, Sean.
Yes, well, Varang, I think, is an interesting thing. He was going for the place there, and they gave him the 15th place, but
1 point.
But,
point.
Yes.
That's more than Britain got in the blasted Eurovision Song Contest. We got 0 point, I think, that time.
But the interesting thing is, I think there's a lot of riders in between these leaders. We see the 7 leaders. You know, there's Mercado, Fletcher, Moncotillas, Ampieri. There are 220, 255, Perron and Sherra. McGee is in there at around the 3 minutes, and then we see Varang with the rider from Mercado, was it?
Yep, Mercado, yep, from Benesto. And it looks like, going back to the pictures here on the screen, that O'Grady's managed to get himself back into something of a bit of a chase group at the moment. Haven't quite seen what's happened to Zabel, but as I once over the top and down the other side, some of these specialist climbers are pretty mad when it comes down to dropping off the mountain climb. This is an extremely long descent, and Mike Smith in Paris, why don't we have a downhill thing to frighten people as well, eh?
Yes.
How's your graphics going?
Well, in fact, we have shown 1 or 2 graphics of the downhills since we started the tour. It seems like ages ago now, David, so I don't know whether they've got one lined up for me for this descent, because as you rightly say, it is quite a long descent all the way virtually down to the feed zone, the ravitaillement, which comes at 122 kilometres. So some death-defying stunts by some of these riders are now in store for all our viewers. It should make interesting viewing. I always like to see them whizzing down. The only difference is, though, David, and I'm sure people have spotted this, you get lots and lots and lots of people spectating on the climbs, but you got very few on the descent, because, of course, they're suddenly whizzing past at speeds sometimes in excess of 60 miles an hour. So there's not a lot of point in spectating on a descent, is there? Because you only see them going shoo, shoo, and then they're gone. Anyway, here's the important thing, and I was quite curious to see Richard Verranck there sprinting over the top of the Izoard. I knew that 14 riders had gone over ahead of him, and I thought, nah, he won't bother for just 1 silly little point, will he? But yes, he did, and that tells us a lot, doesn't it, David? Every point to Richard Verranck is important. He even put the effort in to get that 1 point for 15th place. There you see the situation. Lance Armstrong in the points himself, now up into 2nd place. Garmendia's come from nowhere because he got the maximum points, of course. He's up into 3rd place. So the situation has changed below Verranck, but you've got to say that the Frenchman has to be in a very strong position to get that jersey all the way to Paris.
And Garmendia, though, going through here, you're quite right, Mike, he's going to for the scraps from his master's table, I think, at the moment, because the next climb will be a 2nd category climb, and when he goes to a 2nd category climb, there will be points down to 10th place, 20, 15, 12. So Garmendia, if he can hang on out there to the next climb, which will be after 156 kilometres of race, it's got a long way to go yet, could probably leapfrog Armstrong into 2nd spot, but it may be just tactics as far as the Bianchi team team are concerned, to send him down there so that they have to chase it. But Garmendia is so far down General Cascade, and I don't think the US Post is going to be too bothered. He's 39 minutes and 21 seconds down. So I think you've seen the general situation over the top, and as they come down here, we'll keep an eye on the pictures of them dropping down off the top. We wish them the best of luck, and it's probably the only opportunity before we go back up the next mountain, Mike, for you to dig down into your great big box of or file of emails. If you'd like to dig something out, give me a shout as soon as you've got something in your hot little hand, and we'll pick them up as we just now going to be a bit quiet for a change. Commentators normally speak far too much. We'll just let you watch them come down the mountain until Mike Smith has dug amongst his lots of bits of paper. Just to give us 2 or 3 minutes to watch this. Well, I thought they did give us a top shot. Normally they do when they're coming down. A sinuous descent again. Look at this, they come down here. They're travelling at 35, 40 miles an hour. You may notice that the tarmac and certain parts going into bends has been relayed to make sure the rise came down here smoothly, no bouncing over the potholes. And the US Post are on the front, so you watch it. And Mike Smith, have you shuffled the pack, Mike?
Oh yes, I've got loads of them here, David. How long have you got?
How long it takes to drop down the mountain?
Yeah, well, I tell you what,
watch. We might go on. Off you go.
We'll keep our eyes open on the screen, obviously, but I started to go into the story from Neil Penfold of Fareham the other day regarding Phil Anderson. I was hoping that Christy would be there to hear it, but she'd gone off to talk to Pitaki, and Sean said, well, she probably won't come back. And I know she's not there just yet, but I'm going to tell this story anyway. It won't take too long. Nice little story about Phil Anderson. In 1994, says Neil Penfold, when the tour came to Portsmouth, I was 19 and a massive cycling fan like I am now. Went to the hotel in Portsmouth where most of the teams were staying to catch a glimpse of the riders. One of the organisers saw me and asked me who I was looking for. I said Motorola, which of course was the forerunner to US Postal. He then took me into the hotel, into the restaurant, where he introduced me to Phil Anderson, my hero. Phil was in the middle of his meal after a hard day in the saddle, yet he stood up to meet me, shook my hand, gave me the warmest smile, chatted to me, introduced me to the whole team, including Sean Yates and Max Chiandri. They were with Motorola then. I was absolutely amazed and ecstatic. I still have the autographs now, and listen to this, here's the denouement, David. Although I didn't think to ask for the autograph of a certain young, unknown 22-year-old sitting at the same table, whose name I discovered later on was Lance Armstrong. What a nice little story from Neil Penfold.
Nice
Thanks,
bit of history
Neil.
there.
Yeah, nice little story from Neil. We've had one or two asking about Oscar Sevilla, why he isn't in the Akelma team. John Christmas was one guy. Well, John and the rest of you, sadly, Oscar was taken ill just a week or so before the tour. He was hoping to be riding it. I would have liked to have seen him. I like the choir boy. He's a good little climber. And sadly, he's not in the Akelma team because of illness. So thanks for all of you asking about Oscar. Several people also, David, have asked, is there any rule prohibiting women from participating in the tour? Or the other question I've seen from one or two is there a women's tour? Well, yes, there is, and they have their own Tour de France Féminin. In fact, David, we've covered it a few times here on Eurosport over the years, have we not? And one for you to take Go on.
Go on.
All right.
No, I think we've hardly ever covered it, mate. You may be doing some. I didn't. It's maybe those snippets that they show.
Well, a couple of years ago, I did the whole thing.
Yeah.
We covered this in 3 recorded highlights programmes.
That's right. We only do the highlights. We don't do it like we're doing here, do we?
That's correct. That's absolutely correct. I'll give you one more to chew over, David. Going back to Seiko and the outfits they were wearing a couple of days ago with that logo on the side of the shorts, "Legalise my Cannondale." Quite a few people picked up on that. In particular, somebody or some group called Team Ireland, referring to the UCI rule that states a bike's got to have a minimum weight of 6.8 kilometres, which equates to almost exactly 15 pounds. And a lot of people say this is ridiculous. They say that the move to introduce the new jerseys was publicity to get their new superlight bike legalised. So keep up the good work, Cannondale, they say. You really have to keep technology moving in the bicycle world. I believe that as long as the bikes meet safety requirements, it should be allowed to be built for UCI races such as the Tour de France. There's an interesting one from Team Ireland, David. You can chew that one over when you get the opportunity.
We've got commercial breaks coming up at the moment. There's a bloke zooming past the finishing line here on a recumbent bike with wheels about 16-20 inches in size, and it's Vincent Barteau himself and all my commentary colleagues from France are erupting. So talking about bicycles, the UCI might, we're going for an ad break, and he has excited the people here by going across the field. He's an absolute nutcase. He's, by the way, was the man who went into Marseille to win the stage there. I think he went on to take the yellow jersey too as well, or he's wearing the yellow jersey. He's an amazing character. He's entertaining us on a bicycle which would never, ever, ever meet the regulations of the UCI. We'll come back after the break here as you watch them going down the descent to Izard with some commentary. Well, as you watch the riders drop down here from the mountain into the valley, down towards the descent and in towards the feeding station. Still in the lead, we've got Garmendia at the moment. These are the chasing group at the moment. And Sean, just to finally update before we go rabbiting off on about UCI rules and regulations, and Mr. Verbruggen never speak to me again. Just what was the situation at the top of the climb, and who is this? You know, we know it's Garmendia on the lead. In the lead, is he on his own as far as we know at the moment?
Yes, we see Garmendia here. He's still out in front, and he's being chased by the other 5 riders here at the moment. I'm not sure, is there somebody in between? I was taking notes there, but at the top we had Garmendia, we had Yax, Para, De Luca, Peluzzi, Lopez, Monain and Casero. And also in between those there's another group which we haven't seen anything of for a long time now. We have Mercado, we have Fletcher, we have Moncotti, and we have Zampieri, Perron and Ferreira. You know, the bunch is at 5:16 at the moment, and they were going for the sprint there. It looked like Mancheba got the 15th place for me, but they seem to have given it to Varenk for the moment.
Good on the July the 14th. That's it. It's Garmendia pressing on here, and whilst he's going down on his Bianchi bike, I say Bianchi went into bicycle manufacturing 115 years ago. We did have an email from Team Ireland questioning the UCI decision to ban bikes under 6.8 kilo, and in particular brought about by that Cannondale black and white, which they had their jerseys which said legalised Cannondale. I think that was a bit of sort of a cock and a snoot at the UCI, and I think they're quite right, by the way. And whilst you're watching the technicalities here, what's going on, if I could just, and you say, oh, boring, but there Galopin is urging this man on his bicycle. It's a little nice Bianchi bike, 115 years since the company came in, and Bianchi have been putting a lot of technology into bicycle manufacture to make them lighter. And whatever happens in bicycle design and develop, unlike maybe even in Formula 1, it does get handed down to the bikes which you can ride. You can buy bikes now of aluminium, of carbon fibre, with the best gears, the best equipment, the lightest wheels, and it gets passed down to you. But the UCI, in their wisdom, have decided you can't have a bike lighter than 6.8 kilometres. And in fact, people can ride shortly on bicycles as just you want to go out and buy the best bike you can buy that will be better and lighter than the riders can ride under UCI regulation. That seems to be daft to me. In 8 years, Bianchi cut 4.5 pounds off the bike which Brugno won the 1992 World Championship. Imagine that, 4.5 pounds they took off that bike which Bugno won the 1992 championship just some 10 years ago, and they've done it by using this thin wall Decadi aluminium frames, and they've also gone to all the equipment they get, the lightest equipment they could possibly do. Cannondale's done the same thing, Specialized doing the same, all manufacturers doing the same, but there is the UCI saying stop, don't make them any lighter. Ridiculous. Graphics from Mike Smith.
Yeah, couldn't agree with you more, David. Absolutely 100% behind you. Now then, there's been a lot of debate in the last few years about how many days racing riders get under their belt these days. The season starts even earlier than it ever did now and goes right through to the race of the falling leaves, the Tour of Lombardy in the autumn, right from the Tour Down Under to the Tour of Langkawi. Riders who've raced more than 50 days coming into this Tour de France are not doing quite so well, as you will see in a moment. Only Vinokurov in the top 10 overall so far of those who have raced for more than 50 days. Now let's have a look at those riders who have raced for fewer than 50 days so far this season. See the difference. Armstrong, he's at number 1. Bellocchi at number 2. Mayo number 4. Look how many are in the top 10 of the rankings of the Tour de France of those who have raced fewer than 40 days. In fact, Armstrong has only raced, and this includes, by the way, the days of the Tour de France so far. Armstrong has now raced for just 30 days, that's all. Today is his 31st day of racing, and it would appear to suggest that maybe those who've raced more lightly and more, shall I say, selectively, David, are the ones who will do better in the Tour de France. Well, you pays your money, you takes your choice, but those statistics tend to suggest that the Armstrongs of this world and the Greg LeMonds of the generation past, I think Greg really started it, maybe they've got a point.
Sean, I think you're the best man to talk about that. What do you think?
Well, it looks like that, and there's more and more riders doing it, and as Mike said, LeMond was the man who started with it, and it's growing all the time, and the amount of racing that the guys are doing now, the riders are doing, it's so little, it's unbelievable they can't get into shape. But I think the training they're doing compensates for that, and they're doing this special training, and there's a lot of riders doing very well and able to do performances in a race like the Tour de France on very little number of days racing.
But is that, Sean, to do with the fact that the contracts, the money they get paid for the Tour de France, say, or specific tours, enables them to concentrate? I mean, your day, it wasn't a long time ago, but you had to ride all the time to get the money. The contracts today, when you hear the sort of money that Armstrong's getting for riding one race a year, excuse me, I'm not the head rider element too, it does seem to me that there's so much at stake for the publicity in the Tour de France that a rider can devote himself and his team to go for that. Is that the sponsorship and the finance they get having a bearing upon what we're seeing?
Well, I think if you can do it like Armstrong has have done it over the last 4 years, it's working. You win the Tour of France, as we know. The Tour of France is a big part of publicity for the year. Maybe the Tour of France for 3 weeks is 50% of the publicity for a full year. So if it works out, why not do it? The other thing is the problem with a team, if you're going to do a program of races and you want to do 2 national tours, you want to do a lot of smaller tours, you have to have a very big team of riders, because you're not going to have enough riders to do that program. So the teams are getting bigger, and we see some of the teams who do a program like a Mape, for example, they had 35 plus riders, and they have to have that because they were doing a lot of national tours and a lot of the smaller stage races and also the classics. So if the leaders are going to do a small number of races, maybe 40 races maximum in the year, the domestiques are not going to do much more, because they're going to say, well, if I'm going to do 60 races in the year, I'm going to be tired halfway through the season, and they're not going to want to do any more than 45 races in the year.
How many races at your peak? I mean, how many was the maximum number of top races you did in 1 year, Sean?
Well, I think including criteriums, I did about 160 in 1 year. And that would be a little bit on the high side. I'd say 140, but that would be an average for all the riders of my time. The top ones, the top 25 riders in the world rankings. So as you can see, it's changed drastically, and the number of races now, it's so small. I just find it very hard to see how Armstrong can compete at this Tour of France level on that program of races. But it's the training program that they do, and he trains very hard, and the other riders have to be doing the same.
But isn't there a risk, though, as we saw with Botero on Mike Smith's little graph there, that Botero is way off the back, has done very little racing, that if you put all your money in one basket, oops, he's got a bit of backache here, bit of stretching, bit of all this, bit of that, my goodness, he knows what he's doing with his body, doesn't he? Particularly if you've been through cancer, boy, and through those tunnels. He also, the thing about Armstrong, by the way, watching him here, and I'll come back to the Botero of this world, Sean, that many people may not know about Lance Armstrong and his battle against cancer. He has a book about which says it's not about the bike. I think it gets updated every so often. I do see it on sale in the bookshop. It's well worth getting it because certain sections of the press over the years have had a go at him the way he only rides to the Tour de France. But he battled through cancer and he survived through that. Many people go through cancer and don't survive. I don't know where the calculation comes about those that do and those that don't, but they told him, I think in his book, about he had a 50-50 chance of surviving. In fact, many people said 80-20 and some said 90-10 of not surviving. And he went through all the treatment, everything. It's a fascinating book to read. And then when you see this fellow riding up those mountains yesterday like we did, we're not just talking about a normal athlete. In fact, many people say, well, what did he go through in his treatment that made him a champion? It was a determination. When you read the book about Lance Armstrong and how he tackled cancer with a determination like we saw him yesterday on the Alpe d'Huez. I'm not saying that people who die of cancer just give up and die, because the disease is so terrible. It spreads through your body. Nothing really can stop it. But it was a treatment that he took, that it was his battle. It isn't just the fact that cancer is something you can put your mind against. It's going through the treatment. And the treatment for cancer, some of them are horrific, some are not so bad. And it is not only just the treatment, but I don't know if any of you have been through these things, but go through the tunnel for 20 minutes when they go and it checks your body for cancer as you go through this tunnel. If anybody's got a fear of going through tunnels like we see here, go through the machine, and they're very expensive. They cost a lot of money to just check where the cancer is, and he's been through all those tests in his life, and he goes back and he has treatment, and those treatments that he went through have been pretty horrific too. You don't feel them, but you go in again, you lie there, zap, 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 it goes, and he went through all of that, day in, day out, day in, day out. And the dedication to go there and put your body through it and get your mind into it, that is the mind of this man Armstrong. He was gifted from his parentage with the ability, a big hung, big lung, big heart, big recovery, and he's battled and he's battled and he's battled. There's no way saying, well, people who die of cancer haven't battled. They all battle, and that man there battled through that, and riding in the Tour de France is another battle. And I think he's a great ambassador to the cancer cause, and it's going all the time, and every time you see people going on these great events to get money for cancer treatment. One day we will beat that disease, one day we will get there, but meantime those people who have suffered for it have to go through a lot of problems. I can tell you that. It's something that Lance Armstrong has done. That determination, that man, is the same determination we're seeing here. He may not be racing very much, but when he goes training, he trains, he rides. And in fact, when he came back from his cancer, he started riding, and he was like a lemon. He was getting nowhere, and he virtually was going to pack up. And then in the end, Chris Carmichael took him on one side. They took him training. They sent him off to a race, and he finally got his act together, and now he's heading for his 5th Tour de France victory. The US Postal team doing the job looking after Lance Armstrong. Garmendia, I think he's still out down the road. Sean's going through his lunch. I think he's chewing on a rather delightful peach or something right now. Is he still out there, Sean?
No, Garmendia, yes, is still out.
Garmendia, right, yeah.
Still out there on front, and we have the 6 chases of which were the previous breakaway of 7. We have Yaxka, we have Para, De Luca, Pedalozzi, Lopez de Munhan, and Casero. And the bunch is at 6:35 at the moment, and in between we have a number of riders also, which we haven't seen anything on our screens for a long time.
So 17 riders have won in Gap before, including Eric Zabel, who won in 1996. We could see a regroupment coming up here, and it seems that the stinger's gone out of the chase in the race at the moment. Time to go back to Mike Smith and some of those massive mountains of emails.
Yeah, well, I must thank everybody who's taken part in this process, David, because we always get a huge mailbag, so to speak. It's electronic, of course, these days, and we can't possibly get through them all, so my apologies to all you I don't get through. But going back to bike technology, David, Gary of Stroud says if it wasn't for the strangely restrictive practice of defining the exact spec of the bikes, what would be the best design for the Tour overall? There's one again for you to perhaps chew over. Paul and Gary in Glasgow, who've been watching the Tour de France since the early 1980s, have asked about the former Tour de France favourite Robert Miller, not to be confused, of course, with David Robert, who won the King of the Mountains jersey and almost won the Tour of Spain on a couple of occasions, of course. Is he still around? What's Robert Miller doing with himself these days? And back to bikes in general, David, and your pet hobby horse, Mick D. Says, what do you think led to Rally Cycle's demise? Not keeping up with the times, possibly, as with Trek or others, or not keeping a high profile in Europe, as they did in the 70s and 80s by sponsoring a pro team? Was that possibly the reason why they fell by the wayside? Your opinions, please, David, says Mick D. Over to you, Mr. Duffield.
Oh, that rally thing, I forgot in reverse order, puts me a bit on the rack actually, Mike, because nobody knows. I mean, when I joined the company, they had a 64-acre site. They had 6,500 employees. We were manufacturing over 1 million bikes a year, apart from those that were sent overseas and screwed together by the various associate companies. I think that there's many factors that go back. It isn't just one day when they wake up and all that has gone. It's progressive. I mean, Rally led the way with so many things. Yes, they did have the team in the Tour de France. They built up their knowledge of the brand in Europe, because although we knew it in Britain, nobody out in Europe except in Holland knew the brand. So all that racing team they had in the mid-70s carried the brand forward into Europe. But there, and my colleagues may disagree with me, but the export department, they never quite got the specification of the bikes exactly to suit the European requirements. And each of the nations over here have different sort of subtleties to their bikes. So it never sold in great numbers in Europe, and they also put the sale of the bikes in Europe very often through agents rather than having the companies doing it themselves. So there was a little bit of a hiccup in those days, which I don't think repaid for the efforts of the TI Rally team. So you don't have a sponsorship team and expect the business to sell its products afterwards. You must have a backup behind it in sales and marketing. And I think there's a bit of a question mark over how one took advantage of it in those days. And of course, in recent years, Mike, and it's happened in many other parts of the world, if we look at America, there's no major manufacturer the size of Rally virtually still in business, except when they bring the bikes complete from China. Now in Europe there are special import duties on Chinese bicycles to level the playing field off a bit, and so certainly Trek, you see here in America, are a company, they make about 100,000 bikes a year which are made in America, and they are able to capture that market. The American market is 9 million bikes a year. We're in Great Britain, it's about 2 million bikes a year. So you imagine the Hoffers of the world, the Morris of the world, and the rest of those big American bicycle manufacturers now, they've closed their factories down. They just bring them in from China and they sell them under their brand to the supermarkets and so on. But the specialist cycle dealing shop still carries your Treks and your Cannondales and your Specialized. And virtually the same thing happening in Great Britain, is that the big brands have had trouble because the cheap bikes have come in, they're in the mail order shops. Halfords now are virtually dominant in their own brand bikes, which they bring in from far years. So Rally had to battle with that, and that's why recently they've moved the factory to do mainly sub-assembly from bikes from overseas. Mike, back to you.
Okay, well, here's the facts of the breakaway, and as you can see, they're back in credit, as it were, after a couple of occasions when they've lost time on the chase group behind them. So we've got yellow, red, and back to yellow now. 6 minutes 38, the last time check on the descent off the top of the Col du Glandon. Some considerable way to go, of course. Still those two late climbs, a second category climb and then a third category climb, quite late on in the stage. 28 to go and then 8 to go. So I rather think we might see a little bit more red than yellow, David, in the closing stages, as US Postal perhaps just put the pressure on a little bit.
We're watching Garmendia still out there on the lead, and Sean will update us on the gap between this rider on his own who went over the top of the climb of the Izard. What's the situation now, Sean?
Yes, well, we're about 5 or 6 kilometres from the feeding station, which is at 122 k's into the stage, and we have Garmendia out in front, and he has about 35 seconds of an advantage over 6 riders who are Yax, Para, De Luca, Pelazzotti, Lopez de Munhain and Casero, and then we have another group of 4 riders chasing at 3:35 behind Garmendia. They're Mercato, Fleccia, Moncotti and Zampieri, and there was 2 other riders who were chasing, Perron and Cheroux. They have been taken in by the peloton and on the group of Armstrong, and that's they're at 6:35 down on Galmendia.
So there we are, as the US Postal Team on their Trek bikes plough along. We were asked questions about what happened to rally. I tried to answer the question just a moment or two ago. But the other thing is, of course, that British cyclists, particularly the clubmen, do not want to be seen riding a big brand. And so however much one put into the racing development of the rally bicycle, and the late Gerald Donovan made some superb bikes. They wouldn't be seen riding a rally bike, however good it was and better than anything else. And therefore, it's a great shame that maybe Rally didn't keep their Carlton brand going, which had a great cachet. And Tom Simpson started out at Carlton bicycle many years ago, as did Hugh Porter and many other riders like him. But Rally decided to try and keep one brand going, whereas Bianchi always had. We saw the Bianchi rider down there, an acceptance in the racing public, because Fausto Coppi rode Bianchi bikes. Even though then you could go into a shop and buy an ordinary shopping Bianchi, that kept going. The British population don't actually want a brand which goes across a whole spread. And so I think that we, the British buying public, have also something to do with the problems Rally ran into. The quick answer about Robert Miller: no, nobody knows where he is. The rumours are flying round, and I wouldn't like to get involved in the rumours if Robert's listening to this, but we'd always like to get in touch with him. Where are you, mate?
Yes, I often get asked that question, David, but I haven't been in touch with Robert for a long time, ever since he was briefly helping out the British Cycling Federation after he retired. Since then, I believe he's been one or two training camps in Spain, but that apart, I can't add to that at all. Many people have said that Lance Armstrong's greatest rival, at least before the start of the tour, was Jan Ullrich, and even Armstrong himself said pretty much the same. Well, the gap between them after the first mountaintop finish yesterday, Alpe d'Huez, 2 minutes and 10 seconds. And that's a little bit narrower a gap than when the last two were in confrontation after the first mountaintop finish. For instance, in 2001, 2 minutes 34, and back in 2000, a massive 4 minutes and 14 seconds. So Jan Ullrich limiting his losses a little better on Lance Armstrong than in times gone by. Could that be, I asked David, a portent for the future of this particular race this year?
That's what's going to keep us all riveted, I hope, to the coverage by Eurosport, British Eurosport International, of the Tour de France 2003, the 100th. And this man out in front, Garmendia, is riding in the same strip as Ullrich, who might have something to play towards the back end of this race, particularly in the Pyrenees, where I think those climbs. Sean, just a quick comment from you about the Pyrenees yet to come, because today there were no great shakeout. We've got what they call the interim stage. We go into the Pyrenees. Would you rate those good or bad for Ullrich versus Armstrong?
Well, I think Ullrich always seems to get a little bit stronger as the race go on. We've seen a number of times Armstrong in the end of the tour, he seems to be weakening a little bit. So I think the Spanish riders will be, very dangerous in the Pyrenees, because they're going to have so much support down there, and they're on top now with their morale is very, very high.
That's the chase crew at the moment. 63 kilometres to go. Garmendia is out there, a Spanish rider heading down south and heading off towards the Pyrenees, where the orange jerseys of the Escotil team, I'm sure we're going to see them in fine form too as well. 61 kilometres to go. This is the chase group. They're certainly one of their riders in there. Is this Garmendia coming back?
Yes,
Sean?
The six leaders, the six chasers, let's say, they've caught up with Garmendia now, so we're back to 7 in the leading group again, with the 4 chasers at the 3:35.
With Casero in there too from the Bianchi team. They've got 2 men up in that leading group, and they go through the feed zone here, and the feed zone they will have now covered in the race so far 122 kilometres, 62 kilometres to go, and so through the feed zone as the riders now trickling through this little town of Guresti, and it's settling down before we start the next bit of action. Just going back to clear off one more of the emails, and you can keep an eye what's going, and we'll come back to you on some of the detail of that. Gary Stroud asked, what's the best design of a bicycle for the Tour de France? The answer to that, Gary, is from Stroud, there's no real individual bike, because what you're seeing here are bikes that are built for one part of the tour, like we saw the very lightweight bike which is being used by Simone yesterday for the stage up the Alps, below the weight, or they had to put some lead on it or something to take it. It was 200 grams too light by the UCI scales, had to weigh the bike down to get it back in. You need a lightweight bike in the mountain sections. You need another bike, say, for the prologue time trial, and my goodness, David Miller had something to say about that, because they had a special bike there where unfortunately the big chainring at the front, it threw off the chain, and that was that. So that was a bike for the prologue. I was watching the whitewater canoeists coming down here. It's great sport in this part of the world, by the way. And then it's like canoes. See that one there? That's a little whitewater canoe. It's short. It doesn't have any rudder behind it. You just have to, and it's very, when you can turn over in the thing, you can actually come up the other side with your splash guard on. And the whitewater canoeists, they have the crash head on the top. They have the special inflatables in case they don't come out. You can actually turn the canoe over. Whereas there's other canoe racing, which is like the K1s you see if you watch Eurosport's coverage of some of the World Championships canoeing. You have the K1s and the K2s, very thin canoes with the canoeists doing that, and you have other canoes too as well, like Canadian canoes, or you have different canoes for different circumstances. And the same with bicycles. A prologue time trial bike is not one you'd ride today. The same thing in the mountains, you would not ride the same bike as on the flat. And the same thing we found the other day when talking to Pataki's people, that the Pinarello made a very special bike for him, which was very heavy by today's standards, but it was strong, with a big powerful bloke going in the sprints, and he needed that bike which didn't flex in the bottom bracket, but it would give him the ride he wanted into the finish. So in other words, it's horses for courses. I hate cliches, but that's what it is. There's no one single bike which will take you through the Tour de France in today's cycling. And you imagine 1903, they started on a bike and they finished on the same bike, barring little bits they had to change on the way through that had broken. Single speed bikes, long wheelbases, fat tyres which they carried the spares on their shoulders, and a layback angle because it was so rough that they couldn't have the upright angles we have today. That's the head angle and the seat angle. Laid back because it was so rough, and there they would go with their bottles on the front, aluminium bottles in the wire cages, and their spare tubular tyres on, and they had to do all the repairs, and they just had a simple bike which they did everything. Eventually uphill, downhill. Then we had derailleur gears coming on. In fact, they banned derailleur gears for a period of time, a bit like the UCI. Ostriches with their heads in the sand. The Tour de France said, no, we won't have derailleur gears. It's defeating the essence of the sport. In the end, they gave in to that. And after a while, they said, well, we'll supply the bikes, because they were concerned about the manufacturers controlling the race result. And they banned manufacturers' bikes, and they gave every rider an issue which they made specifically for the race. And of course, you can't give a bike to a rider who's maybe 6'1" as the same as somebody who's 5'4". So in the end, they gave up on that, and they allowed manufacturers to come in and make bikes to suit the riders and to suit the different terrain they're going over, and to use modern material in the wire cages, and their spare tubular tyres on, and they had to do all the repairs, and they just had a simple bike which they did everything. Eventually uphill, downhill. Then we had derailleur gears coming on. In fact, they banned derailleur gears for a period of time, a bit like the UCI. Ostriches with their heads in the sand. The Tour de France said, no, we won't have derailleur gears. It's defeating the essence of the sport. In the end, they gave in to that. And after a while, they said, well, we'll supply the bikes, because they were concerned about the manufacturers controlling the race result. And they banned manufacturers' bikes, and they gave every rider an issue which they made specifically for the race. And of course, you can't give a bike to a rider who's maybe 6'1" as the same as somebody who's 5'4". So in the end, they gave up on that, and they allowed manufacturers to come in and make bikes to suit the riders and to suit the different terrain they're going over, and to use modern material. So I was a bit long-winded to Gary of Stroud, and I hope people back at home watching this don't realise that they're just not going into a shop, giving a bike or get a bike which is just off the shelf. They're specially designed for each stage. They're specially designed for the team and for the riders, and they cost a lot of money. So the UCI, who tried their wisdom to stop various advances in bicycle design, particularly they stopped the design of the single down tube bikes used on the track because they've got trying to save cost and this, that and the other. Modern technology will always cost something, but the UCI, I think they've got their heart in the right place, but somehow the technicalities, they just lose sight of the fact that we must allow design and development to continue. Going on to wheels, for instance, now the UCI again are saying that your wheels must pass tests which we lay down to you, that the wheels must not fragment and break into pieces when you crash, in case you might injure a spectator or another rider. So all the wheels that are here have to be certified by a special test, and you must then say, yes, our wheels suit this test, and then tell the UCI what wheels you're using. But every day they use different wheels. You can imagine the work that's being done by the mechanics, by the people back at the service de course, as they call it, where they have to go back to you saying, we're using this wheel, this Shimano, that Campagnola, this, and the other. By the way, our mechanic builds special wheels, and he builds them with this hub and that and this and something else. And the oppression, I think is the word, of the UCI. I think they put their sticky hand too much on to cycle design development. I'm sure now that the president of the UCI, Hein Verbruggen, every time we have conferences with him and questions come up, is, David, you wish to talk about the technicals? And I do. I go out there. I'm sorry about me lecturing about this, but somebody has to go out there with guns blazing. Otherwise, we'll all be riding bikes with a big front wheel and little wheel at the back. Sorry about that, Mike.
Well, don't apologise, David.
What you having for lunch today, mate? What you having for lunch today?
I've had my usual brie butty about half an hour or so ago. But no, David, I mean, I agree with you. And the correlation to what you've just been talking about and world records is not dissimilar, because in the world record, the hour record, we've seen a similar thing now. We've had all these developments with the tri-bars and the Superman position and so on. Graham O'Brien, of course, was a marvellous instigator, an innovator, in my opinion. And then they decided, we can't have bicycles like that, and we'll ban them. We'll ban them, and we'll go back to the Eddie Merckx era. And so we now have an outright record, which was Chris Boardman's 56 point whatever it was, set up in the middle of his career. And we have now what's called the Athlete's Hour, David, whatever that might mean. And do you know something? I really felt glad that Chris Boardman went and had a go at that one as well before he retired, so that you could get that and say, well, whichever way you want to play the cards, UCI, I'm still the world record holder.
Mike, funny you've been talking, I'm sorry for people back at home who don't understand techno, but as you were saying that, we just had, and I was talking about the design of bicycles, and Sean's keeping an eye on the racing, and he'll update us when I've just finished wrapping it over. Coming through the finish area, the local people here have come through. In fact, there goes one, and that is very similar to J.K. Starley bicycle, with these wheels about 38 inches diameter, with the original diamond frame upon it and an old acetylene lamp on the front with the solid tyres on it. We also saw one with a single down tube, again with solid tyres, which must date back to, I don't know, the late 1920s, I suppose, may even be further than that. These are the bikes that were evolved over the years from the penny farthing, and it was racing development that did it, because when J.K. Starley designed a bike with equal wheels, triangular type frame, and a drive from the bottom bracket to the back end, it's completely annihilated the old ordinary bike. And there are people coming up and down here with what I call museum bicycles, which shown the development over the years. We've been seeing the same thing happening, and it's racing because J.K. Starley sent his bicycles out to ride a 50-mile, 100-mile time trial, and they smashed the record of the old ordinaries, and that was the end of the old ordinary. And from then the development of bikes has been going on, very much with racing being the edge to it. And today people can go into a shop and buy a bike that's very similar to what Lance Armstrong rides, by the way. They've got frames in their range which is identical to Lance Armstrong's bike, a light, lively bike with good equipment on it. If you want to go racing, you'll get a cracking bike, and that's racing development, free of any regulations. But now we're coming to a bit of a grinding halt, where the people back there in Switzerland decide that it's time to bring a bit of a stop to things.